Chapter 744. Snake Tongue wasn't sure if she was still alive. Her soul had already been in an out-of-body state for over half a year. To be precise, it had been 183 days. A spellcaster's high-precision perception of changes in the world allowed her to be like a clock, meticulously recording the passage of time. But right now, the only reference for this ability was herself. From the looks of it, the only effect it had was a meaningless record of death. She didn't know if this had already broken the records of the inner world, but she knew that her condition was very, very bad. Perhaps she was only one step away from death. It was still the same question. Was she really still alive? Legends of undead immortals had been passed down in East Asian cultures since ancient times. Although the details were different, the general idea was that cultivators abandoned their fleshly bodies, and their souls left their bodies to roam between heaven and earth. Because of this, they possessed inconceivable divine abilities. But the trajectory of their lives unexpectedly drew a parabola. At the end, they fell into the abyss of despair. Perhaps in a few years or a few decades, Snake Tongue's example would be added to the footnotes of undead immortals. But the most likely outcome for her would be the same as the swirling and tearing clouds in front of her. She would be silently annihilated without the slightest trace. One didn't need any precise perception to determine the rate at which a spirit body decayed. Her time approached with each passing day, and her body gradually lost the ability to move independently. Therefore, for the past 2 days, Snake Tongue was no longer like a spirit that followed Gongqi around in the cloud world. Gongqi was indifferent to this. The relationship between Snake Tongue and Gongqi had already undergone a clear change. Moreover, it was a destructive result. On Snake Tongue's side, there was hope and despair, vigilance and numbness. On Gongqi's side, half a year had passed. No matter how gloomy and ruthless he was, it was impossible for him to perfectly control his emotions at all times. Bewilderment, fear, irritation, and anxiety. These negative elements were like prisoners. Bit by bit, they scattered out and were received by Snake Tongue. Finally, on a certain day, at a certain moment, these accumulated elements broke through the limits of the hope in Snake Tongue's heart. The net of her will was finally unable to bear the truth of despair. Snake Tongue erupted. She questioned Gongqi's lack of progress over the past half a year. Of course, she also questioned the substance of Gongqi's activities here. Then the truth of everything was revealed. Gongqi, this insufferably arrogant extraordinary who seemed to have a card up his sleeve, was actually just a prisoner trapped in this cloudy world. The two circumstances weren't fundamentally different, just that Gongqi's reliance on his flesh shell was a bit less, and his arrangements for his escape were a bit more stable. He had the ability user association as his backing, and so on. When all these things add up, it's actually a qualitative difference. The difference was so great that it made Snake Tongue jealous. Jealous to the point of insanity. Gongqi had the ability user association behind him, while she was just a lone wandering soul. She didn't have anyone she could fully trust, nor did she have the strength to back up her trust. Even if she had a grade B cursemancer who was extremely rare in the inner plane, she could only carefully manage her own base between the cracks of various factions. After so many years, she had only managed to find a seemingly loyal but actually more and more unfathomable mutated tree demon. She had only managed to build a small, insignificant church with some deceptive designs. In the out-of-body state, she could use these designs to last 2 months, 3 months, or at most half a year. There was simply no meaning in continuing to prolong it. She even felt that even if she immediately broke free and returned her spirit body to her body, with her current state, the greatest possibility was that she would die along with her fleshly body. So, I can already be considered dead, right? A good swimmer drowns. The meaning of my life is to embellish those absurd legends, right? Snake Tongue chuckled softly. The emotions she felt in her spirit body state were nothing more than remnants of human habits. Every bit of these habitual traces consumed a certain amount of energy. Correspondingly, when the energy was consumed to the point where it wasn't enough to maintain the foundation of her spirit body, these habitual traces could only be regarded as meaningless, superfluous, and disperse first. I'm already dead. Snake Tongue came to this conclusion. If she had a choice, she would have already taken her own life. But the current situation was that her spirit body was wrapped in a layer of light muslin that was hard to fathom, the muslin of silence. This reward that Gong Qi had given her in advance had now become a shackle that controlled and monitored her. When Snake Tongue was at her peak, she could still set up a shielding layer to block and interfere with her. But now she was so weak that she had to rely on the muslin of silence to ensure that her spirit body didn't collapse. Conversely, she couldn't make her spirit body collapse even if she wanted to. This strange item was gradually corroding the structure of her spirit body. As a curse master, Snake Tongue could guess Gong Qi's plans. Perhaps before long, she would only be able to continue existing between heaven and earth in a distorted form like an artifact spirit. This was something she feared even more than death. Unfortunately, she didn't have the strength to retaliate. Why had she fallen to such a state? Her reflection had just begun when Snake Tongue's subjective thoughts intentionally cut it short. She didn't want to engage in these meaningless thoughts. Apart from continuing to consume her soul force, it would cause her to rapidly and continuously approach that pitiful artifact spirit. She emptied her mind and silently curled up under the muslin of silence. She watched the surrounding clouds surge and tear apart before drifting away. Gradually, her mind became somewhat absent-minded. Perhaps dissipating like this wasn't a bad thing. The moment her consciousness collapsed might be true liberation. Snake Tongue was absent-minded and absent-minded. Her mind seemed to truly dissipate along with the clouds in this strange and despairing void. And in the chaotic prelude to the complete destruction of nothingness, and the complete arrival of chaos, a color completely different from the white clouds and bloody light she was accustomed to seeped in. It was like splashing ink, instantly rendering the edge of her perception. An illogical change of situation. It was a dream. Snake Tongue had a dream. She dreamed of Sakura City. She dreamed of the shrine she lived in during her youth. She dreamed of the clear ripples of North Mountain Lake. She dreamed of the color of night that blended perfectly with the lake water. Under the hazy curtain of darkness, she calmly walked on a tree-lined road. The cool breeze that blew against her face carried the fresh scent of a fragrant camphor tree in the middle of its flowering season. Zhou Weiman seemed honest and sincere, but he was a freak that wasn't worthy of trust. It was this point that gave people a favorable impression of him. Mrs. Yamamoto snorted at her. Her face, which couldn't even be supported by hyaluronic acid, was filled with jealousy. Right. She was also Northmont Yuehui. In her early years, in order to conceal her identity, she had personally operated a fake body to satisfy the desires of a few young girls. That was an age of freedom. She could freely switch between two identities, and she could casually tease those foolish people who were drowned in money, beauty, and power. Now that she thought back to those days, she felt that they were quite pleasant. But unknowingly, her happy life had ended. It was probably after she became a B-rank curse mage that she began to have even greater ambitions towards cultivation. She wholeheartedly worked hard to climb even higher peaks. Snake Tongue, who was also Northmont Yuehui, had returned home while drifting through her memories. Up until now, everything had been fine. She put down her handbag and bent over to change her shoes. In the next moment, the attack arrived. Snake Tongue was absent-minded once more because her instinctive reaction was completely ineffective. Her defensive counterattack had been completely reduced to nothingness. And what appeared before her eyes was a scene that seemed so real that it bordered on absurdity. That's right, am I dreaming? This dream was so real that it caused one to tremble. Snake Tongue dreamt that Northmont Yuehui was walking like a normal person between the residence and the distorted camphor tree. This was the pilgrimage route that she had planned out. This meant that her fleshly body had already entered the most dangerous stage. She had to accept the protection and energy injection of Georgia Wei men. She also dreamt that Northmont Yuehui had been infiltrated and violated. The irony was that the intruder was actually a high-ranking cadre of the Myriad Spirit Order that she had single-handedly created. Georgia Wei men had made a move. This was within reason. But it could be seen that after that bastard had seized the life of a high-ranking cadre of the Order, he hadn't left Northmont Yuehui any leftovers. And when the chaotic situation ended, only Northmont Yuehui remained in the messy residence. This was her body, which had exhausted the last shred of its strength, making a final struggle. It can't be like this. I have to get up. Snake Tongue had enough of this dream. She could imagine the fate of her body in her mind, but she really couldn't bear to see such a realistic and absurd scene play out before her eyes. At this moment, she merged with Northmont Yuehui and struggled with all her might, even though she knew that struggling in a dream was meaningless. Then it moved. Her fingertips moved. In the dream, Northmont Yuehui was dumbfounded. In the cloud world, Snake Tongue was also dumbfounded. The entire world, regardless of whether it was real or fake, seemed to freeze. Countless thoughts rose and fell in succession. She pushed Snake Tongue to try again and again, but the result made her go crazy. What was this? What was this? If she was watching a movie that had nothing to do with her, if she was only going to endure the torture of the scene, then Snake Tongue would have accepted it. But what was going on with this ambiguous situation? She could control her body and had that tiny bit of reaction, but she simply didn't have the feeling of her soul fusing with her body. It was like she was using a game controller to control a character in a game. Half of her body didn't respond, but the other half sent back clear feedback. It was nothing more than feedback, nothing more. It wasn't any more meaningful than the vibration of the controller. Her soul body was still in a detached state, and her body couldn't receive the warmth and nourishment of the supernatural power. Everything seemed to be separated by a thin and hard layer of glass. All she could do was constantly wipe away the moisture that she breathed out, making the scene in the dream a bit clearer. She used this illusory reality to torture herself a bit more crazily. Apart from this, there was nothing. Nothing at all. Even the tiny bit of vital energy left in her soul body had scattered quite a bit from this torment, pushing her one step closer to the edge of death. Reality and fiction, hope and despair, were separated by a layer of a dream. She nearly lost control of her emotions. What burned was a mixture of impatience, anger, despair, and that tiny bit of stubborn hope. Snake Tongue's soul body was scorched, and she couldn't stop trembling. What's going on? The abrupt sound wave vibration caused Snake Tongue to wake up with a start. Gong Qi's cold face shattered the dream that made one go crazy and despair. This powerful person still maintained the strength of an extraordinary. Even though he was in his soul body state, his gaze was still as focused as before. Dense clouds of doubt tumbled within. Snake Tongue stared at him until Gong Qi's gaze turned a bit colder. What did you do? Oh, he didn't know. The veil of silence was constantly monitoring her, but she hadn't discovered any clues. Was it really just a dream? This was what Snake Tongue thought and said. I'm dreaming. I'm dreaming that I'm going to die. Snake Tongue suddenly felt that it was extremely comical when she saw Gong Qi's instant bewilderment. She laughed loudly, and her soul body was like a candle flame in the wind, swaying in the violent winds above the clouds. Gong Qi looked at her, speechless. Regardless of whether it was the violent winds above the clouds or the laughter, it was impossible for them to be transmitted to another spacetime. However, there were some special psychic waves that possessed even more marvelous radiation and penetrative properties. Fan Lu suddenly opened his eyes in the Lake City region of Earth, which was completely unrelated to the cloud world. He could see that the main body of the world was still dark, but the rampant spotlights and noisy music painted the environment into a nightclub atmosphere. That's right, this is the nightclub. How did I get here? Oh, after sending off the boss, he came back to greet that lunatic centaur. In the end, that fellow maintained a high level of excitement for a long time. He forcefully dragged him and Little Zhao, who had hurried over to support him, to the highest-class nightclub in Lake City to drink and celebrate. Little Zhao was already hanging in the corner. As for Fan Lu himself, he seemed to have fallen asleep and had a dream. Dream. What did he dream of again? The alcohol stimulated part of his brain to slow down. Fan Lu already had no sensitivity towards the vague memories of his dream. He didn't wait for him to be more clear-headed. A grimace painted with blush, eyebrow pencil, and lipstick suddenly blocked his eyes. The grimace opened its mouth and roared. Get up and get high. F***ck, what a nightmare. What the hell are you doing, centaur? That's right, there seemed to be a centaur in his dream. That fellow was messing around in the old base. Fan Lu's thoughts were broken again. In reality, The centaur in the real world was grabbing his shoulder and shaking him violently. The shaking made the 1 kilogram of alcohol that he had just poured into his mouth want to be sprayed onto the ugly face in front of him. If that happened, he would be dead for sure. Fan Lu decided to go out and sober up. He could actually dream of this centaur. If he continued to play with this lunatic, he might take the initiative to drill into the gene modification room. He covered his mouth and waved his hand to push away the centaur. He hurriedly got up and walked out. However, just as he took a step, he was grabbed by the back of his collar and forcefully pulled back. At the same time, another 1 kilogram bottle of brandy was forcefully stuffed into his mouth. Woo woo woo. The centaur laughed loudly until his entire face was distorted. At the same time, he didn't forget to call out to the various beauties in the room. Take off his pants, let's celebrate. Also, whoever gets this guy's belt, no matter how much other venues offer, I will pay them all. That girl will be the queen tonight. The 7 or 8 women in the private room screamed at the same time. The next moment Fan Lu, who was drunk, was drowned by the pink arms and legs. His eyes rolled up, and his remaining consciousness asked the ultimate question in the world. Who am I? Where am I? Chapter 745. April 28, 2097. It was the weekend, and the moon was waning. However, it was still a bright moon that did not fall at night. Whether it was on the shore or on the lake, the view was flat. The lake and the sky seemed to be devoid of dust. In Bancheng, such moonlight was said to be able to shine through the Beishan Lake and reach the ruins of the ancient capital under the lake. Therefore, many Bancheng residents went on a family trip to the Beishan Lake to enjoy the scenery of moon overlooking Mountain Island. There were also people who set off fireworks or took a boat to the lake until the latter half of the night. Thanks to the moonlight, the incense of Mr. Zoe Jiawei was also very strong these 2 days. The clusters of white flowers on the branches and leaves seemed to be able to store moonlight, which contrasted with the green leaves. It was dazzling. Enlu stood on the top deck and looked at the lakeside where the figures were gradually thinning out. Most of them were looking at the special camphor tree. She was only 2 or 3 kilometers away from the lakeside. The person on the shore must have also noticed this. The aquatic plants near the shore also seemed to be very active, rippling light waves in the shallow water. A very cautious guy. Enlu had no intention of challenging Zoe Jiawei's vigilance. Speaking of which, it should have been scared out of its wits in the past 2 days. Well, the surrounding residents were actually not having a good time. However, everyone was muddle-headed and forgot everything when they woke up. If you insist on being isolated from the world, then you can't blame others. With a smile, Enlu sent a signal to the crew. The ray yacht turned around. Like a dolphin, it swam on the sparkling Beishan Lake, showing off its skills and breaking through the waves. Soon, it left the trees and stone embankment on the southern shore behind. However, at this time, Enlu's mind still maintained a vague connection with the other side. She herself did not have this ability. What she relied on was the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District. It was through the magic of the Blood Soul Temple that she could collect the restless emotions that were constantly gathering and pressurizing in the relatively vast area on the southern shore of the Beishan Lake. It originated from the dream. In front of Enlu, the virtual workspace was always lit, forming a beautiful light-color balance with the sprinkling moonlight. In addition, a virtual keyboard was also projected. Enlu's slender fingers danced on the keyboard as she drafted the letter. Enlu chose to use this retro method to sort out what she had done, experienced, and guessed in the 3 days since she arrived in Bancheng City. She wanted to find a connection and better explain it to her boss who was thousands of kilometers away. So far, only 25% of the total budget of the operation has been spent. Practically every item is below expectations. Aside from the basic consumables, this item has already exceeded the budget by 4 times. Mr. Luonan has displayed astonishing efficiency, both in the way he arrived in Bancheng City and in the way he acted after arriving. It only took him an hour to achieve the basic goal that he had set in the beginning. All the time that followed was spent on arduous and monotonous cultivation and experiments. Enlu finished inspecting the draft from before. She pondered for a bit before continuing to write. I believe that Mr. Luo Nan possesses a type of talent. There is certainly a logic system within his brain that we are unable to comprehend. I have eliminated words like divinity, omniscience, and so on. This is because I have seen Mr. Luo Nan repeatedly make inconceivable judgments. He takes a long time to think and then verify things. He still retains the habits of thinking similar to humans, but his methods are very different. Right now, the yacht had slightly changed its direction, and the angle of the moonlight was slightly different. The virtual workspace automatically adjusted the brightness of the colors, forming a faint wave-like fluctuation. The speed of Enli's fingers was not affected. On the contrary, when it came to the current domain, the magical experiences of the past few days surged up in her mind, forcing her to not even think about words and forming sentences. She only wanted to pour out her thoughts. I have seen at least 2 different modes of thinking related to Mr. Luo Nan's thinking. The first one is the configuration of thinking that the order needs the most urgently. I believe that Mr. Luo Nan already possesses a highly mature system model in this domain. In his eyes, all material and mental structures, including the forms of actions of supernatural powers, can be classified as configuration problems. I have mentioned the complex relationship between snake tongue and the mutated camphor tree. I hope that my description won't cause you any trouble. In fact, the words I use to express myself are merely a clumsy description of the configuration diagram that Mr. Luo Nan drew. Enla didn't bother to express anything here. She just inserted the 3D configuration diagram that Luo Nan had drawn 2 days ago in response to this problem as an attachment. The automatic layout effect was very dazzling. Even the plain text seemed to jump. The maze-like configuration diagram didn't show the image of a large tree or a beauty at all. It was more like the perspective diagram of some kind of complicated machine. According to Luo Nan, the diagram included the dynamic energy of Snake Tongue's body and the camphor tree that was several kilometers away. It also included the interaction of this model with the surrounding environment. They could be direct and orderly arranged. They could be disassembled and reassembled. They could be optimized according to a set of rules, forming a system that was even more closely related. These were all Luo Nan's explanations and demonstrations. Enla could only accept and copy everything. After doing all this, Enla quickly got rid of this domain that she wasn't good at. She began to talk about another matter that she was more concerned about. It was also a peculiar process that she was still pushing forward. As for the second type of thinking program, perhaps you have already seen some clues from the changes in Bloodsoul Temple. In the past few days, the emotions of the residents of Bancheng have been very restless. The Order even took the opportunity to develop a few shallow believers. These changes originated from Mr. Luo Nan. He is using a method similar to the dream entering technique to smear the dreams of the people of Bancheng. He calls this method creation. The following is a related work. Enlu inserted the second attachment. This was a psychic diagram that Luo Nan had created last night. The scene on the diagram was relatively abstract. From Enli's point of view, Luo Nan had drawn a stormy weather on the sea. The silhouette of a giant ship teetered on the crest of the waves. But the most eye-catching thing on the diagram was the 3 sets of dusky pillars of air. They were like 3 scattered sea tornadoes, occupying more than half of the space in the diagram. Luo Nan didn't deliberately hide his methods. He even took the initiative to invite Enlu to look at it. He said that she could interpret it from many angles. This was why Enlu dared to pass this psychic diagram to Lady Halder. She even added her own judgment. She didn't try to forcefully interpret the psychic diagram. Instead, she talked about her impression of Luo Nan as a whole. I feel that Mr. Luo Nan has a strange sense of dislocation. He clearly possesses inconceivable talent and ability. He also firmly believes in his own unique logic system. But he often unconsciously underestimates his own strength and the effects of his actions when making specific judgments. With Mr. Luo Nan's perception and judgment, this sort of dislocation shouldn't have occurred. Perhaps there is a problem with the frame of reference he chose. I believe that Mr. Luo Nan is currently facing enormous pressure. From what I've seen, he's abandoned all forms of entertainment in Bancheng. Aside from those thoughts that are hard to understand, He's engaged in high-intensity training between the two energy centers. He's extremely nervous. He's as taut as a bow. It's as if he's going to fight a life-or-death enemy at any moment. But the horned demons that have been running rampant these past few days simply don't have the qualifications to become his enemy. I'm unable to determine where his enemy is coming from, but the bottom line of my judgment is that it's an extraordinary level character. But what makes me very puzzled is that with Mr. Luo Nan's transcendent status in the Xia City branch, 1 or 2 extraordinaries aren't enough to give him such enormous pressure. Then I consider the secretive nature of Mr. Luo Nan's activities in Bancheng. So I have a guess. It's very likely that he wants to face an opponent that he can't reveal to outsiders. Considering the public nature of his conflict with Quantum Corporation and the Order of Justice, it's unlikely that the enemy comes from these two powers. Then it's very likely that the enemy comes from within the Ability User Association system. Of course, it's also possible that it involves some secret interests that can't be revealed to outsiders. This guess can explain the problem of the frame of reference. It can also partially explain the problem of the psychic diagram. This is because Mr. Luo Nan is only considering the extraordinary level. And this is very likely an opportunity that belongs exclusively to us. An opportunity to truly unify our standpoint with Mr. Luo Nan. Should I try to understand this aspect of information during my time in Bancheng? Should I make my stance more clear to Mr. Luo Nan? I'll leave it to you, boss, to decide. The letter could be considered to have come to an end at this point. There were still a few words that didn't convey the meaning of the letter. Inla had to correct them one by one at the end. She read through the letter once more, checking whether or not she had missed any key information. But the more she read, the more subtle the feeling became. She seemed to have made some sort of misplacement between the lines of the letter. It was in the aspect of standpoint. Inla was a bit absent-minded. And at this time, the speed of the yacht suddenly dropped significantly. It soon came to a stop. She furrowed her brows. She was just about to contact the head of the crew when a message came from the other side. A strong magnetic field has appeared in the surrounding area. The electronic equipment on the ship has been disturbed. It seems that cruising has arrived nearby. Is that so? Inla got up. Because she was looking down from a high vantage point, her field of vision was wide. Her gaze moved a bit, and she saw a strange bubble suddenly bubbling up on the surface of the lake in the distance. The surface of the lake began to ripple. Half a second later, under the illumination of the moonlight, a certain shadowy structure that was still very stubborn emerged from the surface of the lake. It floated up step by step. Inla didn't need to read the follow-up to know that it was a combat machine constructed from flesh and steel. The opponent's body soon completely emerged from the surface of the water. According to the data, the combined weight of flesh and steel should be over 300 kilograms. Its density was far greater than that of water. But this exoskeleton armor, as well as its controller, had never intended to rely on buoyancy. The tough body surpassed the rippling clear water and crushed through the nearly empty transparent air. It slowly rose between the lake and the sky illuminated by the bright moon. It floated in midair. Under the low-power stealth mode, the maglev and jets were always in a closed state. The gloomy multifunctional stealth coating swallowed and distorted the moonlight, making this combat machine appear like a malevolent and oppressive demon. But the surrounding air and lake water faintly resonated. It was as if it had turned into an exclusive choir, singing together in praise of majesty and holiness. Chapter 746. The 300-kilogram mixture of steel and flesh floated in the air for approximately 20 seconds before naturally turning around and landing on the top deck of the yacht. The top deck wasn't that big to begin with, but it was divided into the sunlight area and the driving area. The latter was very difficult to accommodate an exoskeleton armor, so Luo Nan naturally chose to land in the sunlight area. This squeezed Inli's space and gave her quite a bit of pressure. Inla didn't retreat. She trusted Luo Nan's control skills, so she needed to display this sense of trust. When the exoskeleton armor finally came to a stop, the protruding blades of the side arms were only a few dozen centimeters away from Inli's face. The powerful electromagnetic field, The mutual interference forces of the mental and the material blended together. The sound of electric currents from the driving machinery and the fine grinding sounds of metal components formed a reverberation, pushing the surrounding air molecules to oscillate back and forth. It made her body feel numb, as if she had been electrocuted. This was the truth. What followed was a wave of heat. The outermost layer of flesh and fascia of the exoskeleton armor was finally unable to withstand the repeated pressure of various forces. It was as if it had encountered a high temperature. It was scorched black, curled, and finally burned into ashes. Inlo had seen this sort of situation countless times over the past few days. She was already used to it. She didn't even blink. She stood quietly to the side, watching the components of the exoskeleton armor fall off Luo Nan's body one by one. They gradually returned to being neatly arranged components, and were sealed into the metal box formed by the armor's outer shell. The lid of the box closed, but Luo Nan's body still hadn't truly touched the ground. The tips of his feet were suspended in the air, giving off a feeling of weightlessness. Instead, he bore the weight of an incorporeal and powerful force. He rejected the air, the night, and even all external objects, forming a domain of his own that didn't rely on external forces. Even though his floating weight had been reduced by over 200 kilograms, this method of purely relying on his body to resist Earth's gravity shook Inli's mind, even more than the previous scene of wearing armor. This was truly not relying on external objects. His fleshly body floated in the air. This was an extraordinary power that humans had always yearned for in their dreams since ancient times. Even though they had entered the era of distortion, this sort of ability was still rare. It was also the most eye-catching, especially since Luo Nan didn't use any shortcuts or methods. Instead, he used his control of electromagnetic power to probe into the fundamental plane of the world. He used the most upright methods to form this legendary scene. Of course, Inlu was envious in her heart. She had also tried flying before, but it was through an out-of-body state. She couldn't understand the similarities and differences between the two, but it must be a wonderful experience. She didn't need to conceal her emotions. She just stood beside Luo Nan's floating body and let out a soft sigh of admiration. Truly inconceivable strength. If I start learning electromagnetic configuration from now on, will I have the chance to replicate your ability in the future, sir? Of course, this is the most basic requirement. Luo Nan let out a long breath. The tips of his feet finally touched the deck, and the powerful electromagnetic field around him gradually subsided. With your relationship with the Bloodsoul Temple, you already possess the basic strength of mental interference with matter. As long as I can grasp the basic electromagnetism configuration and learn some transformation techniques, I will definitely be able to fly in the air for a short period of time. As for combat applications, I am currently learning them. Clearly, someone had chosen the wrong frame of reference. Inlu didn't continue this topic. As a secretary, mentioning herself was actually a way to highlight the brilliance of the boss. It would be too stupid to declare that she wanted to become like the boss, even if she couldn't help but yearn for it. She changed the topic to Luo Nan's practice schedule. Today ended a bit early. Sir, do you have any other plans? Or do you want to rest early? There's news from Xia City. It's a good time for me to change my mind. News. The coordinates of Grandpa's laboratory are up for auction. Luo Nan was too lazy to form a sentence. He just said a few key words. He sat directly on a bench in the sunlit area and relaxed his body. There's finally some news from that side. I think they'll send me an invitation in the near future. Inlo was even more cautious when dealing with such a sensitive topic. Have you already confirmed the auction house? Yes, the Toyama auction house. It's over at Bin City. Bin City. Inlu nearly said, what a coincidence. But when she saw Luo Nan's unexpectedly relaxed expression, as well as Luo Nan's increasingly deep eyes, she swallowed back her words. She thought for a bit and said, the Toyama auction house has quite a lot of activities in the inner world. After all, the surroundings of the archipelago are rich in mutant species. A lot of special materials are auctioned there. I remember that their spring auction is about to begin. If it's in Bin City. It might not be in Bin City. Luo Nan faintly smiled. If we play a little bit and add some promotional activities, wouldn't we be able to pull more people onto the ship? Onto the ship. Inla subconsciously swept a glance at the yacht beneath her feet. She didn't understand Luonan's joke. Mister, if you want to raise funds, Luonan directly interrupted her. Why would I need to spend money on my grandfather's things? I just want to see who in the world is the one paying for the sound. Inla was unable to grasp Luonan's emotions and thoughts. She could only say the most correct words. I'll listen to Mister's instructions in everything. Luonan nodded slightly and raised his eyelids. He saw that the lights were still on in the work area. Let alone the words on it. The graphics were very familiar. Report to Mrs. Halder? Yes. Mrs. Halder is very concerned about Mister's situation. Inlu absolutely wouldn't call Mrs. Halder boss at a time like this. However, Luonan wasn't able to understand her meticulous thoughts. Luonan didn't have any clear interest in Inli's manuscript. He raised his head and rested in the sunlit area, adjusting the state of his body and mind. Oh, the moonlight was shining down right now. Inla was certain that Luonan didn't care about the matter of the report, but she still didn't close the work area. She just gently walked to Luonan's side, bent her legs, and knelt on the bench with one knee. She massaged Luonan's shoulders to loosen his muscles. For work like massaging shoulders and massaging back, the most suitable position was naturally at the back. However, the top deck was an inch of gold. The position Luonan chose just so happened to be at the edge of the water. There really wasn't any suitable space at the back, so Inla could only use this awkward position. However, this made them appear more intimate, so Luonan didn't refuse. Luonan closed his eyes and enjoyed it for a moment, allowing his body, which was suffering from the penetrating effects of the electromagnetic field, to relax a bit. When he opened his eyes again, his gaze didn't immediately focus. Instead, he was dazed for 2 seconds before he focused on the most eye-catching virtual work area on the top deck. In the end, his gaze focused on the psychic diagram embedded within the words. This diagram was the work he was most proud of for some time. The most wonderful thing about it wasn't the information revealed, but the core logic that formed this diagram. Luonan had told Inlu that there were multiple angles of reference and interpretation, but deep down in his heart, he always believed that the only person who could truly understand this psychic diagram was perhaps himself. This was because this was an intuitive diagram constructed upon the foundation of the developer mode of the mental world. It was also the first time Luonan didn't avoid a true enemy. He risked the danger of suffering a backlash from psychic communication to carry out a surveying and mapping survey. Luonan's initial clairvoyance on the mental plane was vastly different from the results he saw from other ability users. He didn't see the structure of 3 layers, 1 region, and 1 domain from the very beginning. Instead, he saw a deep multi-layered structure of curtains. Countless curtains fluttered and fluttered within the deep void. They were all independent, layer upon layer, and there was no end to them. However, under the influence of rules and power, several strands would occasionally twist and converge, forming either stable or loose nodes. The vast majority of them were only temporarily adhered together, quickly dispersing on their own. But there were also some that, once twisted together, formed into a dead knot. Brand new rules and laws were solidified, making it hard to separate. Basically, Luonan viewed the movements displayed by these curtains as the reflection of extraordinary power on this special plane. Every node that was twisted by the curtains was the result of the extraordinary power of an ability user. It was just like when people explored the abyssal region. Some people were powerful enough to leave behind permanent or semi-permanent solidified configurations in the abyssal region. Some people couldn't even persist for a few milliseconds. Of course, the developer mode of the mental world and the abyssal region couldn't be equated. The former was more like the bottom layer of an operating system. The layers involved were deeper and broader. It was more like the intuitive embodiment of some system rules. Luonan viewed this judgment very cautiously, but he would occasionally float. He gave himself the grand title of a man who gazed directly at the truth of the world. This was the first time that Luonan's version of the truth of the world was consciously replicated and placed into the psychic diagram. It was precisely because of the display of the information in developer mode that this psychic map showed 3 gigantic sea tornado elements that stood between the sea and the sky. These were 3 powerful extraordinary-level enemies that could directly influence the future. The first was naturally Gongqi of the Cloud World. The second was also very clear. It was Luo Yuan, who grasped the dimensional crossbow. As for the third, Luo Nan didn't have a definite target. Instead, he played creatively. He set the target to be the person who drew up the treat plan and the power he represented. He didn't know if the other party was an extraordinary or not, but for a character like Luo Yuan to tacitly cooperate with him, his influence could be imagined. Whether it was in terms of ability or power, it was never wrong to look up to someone. These 3 powers formed the basic structure of the psychic diagram. But from the perspective of composition, the 3 sea tornadoes clearly occupied too much space, destroying the balance of the composition. This also hinted at the conflict between Luo Nan, the true creator, and the actual composition elements. Only after understanding all of this could Luo Nan look at the other elements. The enormous ship that was washed to the top of the waves was a key element that had continued from the beginning of this event. There was nothing much to say about it. What was truly interesting was the throbbing lightning formed by the contrast of light and dark between the layers of clouds, the waves, and the pillars of air. They embodied the tension of the storm in the painting. If one were to analyze it in depth, it would represent some sort of conflict, but it would also represent some sort of connection, especially between the 2 pillars of air of Gongqi and Luo Yuan. The lightning trajectories interweaved particularly tightly. Chapter 747. Luo Nan held a relatively cautious attitude toward the results of psychic communication with extraordinaries. In the past few months, Luo Nan, Mr. Bai Gao Tianshi, and even Old Yu had discussed psychic techniques. The 3 seniors had pointed out very seriously that psychic techniques could provide foresight, but it was very likely that one would suffer a backlash. Whether it was in the legends of ancient times or on the plane of reality, psychics who forcefully peered into the secrets of heaven through psychic and divination techniques could basically write a book on the number of psychics who died from a backlash. This was especially true in the current era, where extraordinary powers were manifested. The levels and realms were clearly differentiated. Even though the ruler had its advantages and the Siyuan had its disadvantages, true experts had their internal logic and external environment integrated into one. They were natural sources of radiation. If one forcefully peeped into them, one would have to be prepared to die from the radiation. And it was very normal for the results of psychic communication to be distorted and interfered with when facing such targets. There were cases of people vomiting 3 liters of blood and receiving the wrong answer. There were even cases of people dying from anger. Whether it was Gongqi or Luo Yuan, they were the strongest people in the world. No matter how low-key they were, the influence of their radiation covered the entire world. Especially Gongqi. He was a powerful figure in the ability user society. His influence was even more astonishing. It was no surprise that he and Luo Yuan had intersected, or that there was some unclear relationship of interest between them. Therefore, Luo Nan wouldn't come to a conclusion easily. The results of psychic communication needed to be verified. Plus, he wasn't directly probing the 2 dangerous targets. When using the psychic diagram, Luo Nan had intentionally overstepped the iron law of avoiding extraordinaries when using the psychic technique. He had taken the initiative to touch the domain of extraordinaries. But he did his utmost to avoid meeting force with force. He tried to use more skillful methods. He made more thorough preparations. He chose a more suitable and ingenious angle. He also found the most comfortable and smoothest starting position. Snake Tongue and Fan Lu. Neither of these 2 were extraordinaries, but one was Gongqi's spirit behind his back. The other was Luo Yuan's driver. They formed a close and direct connection with the 2 extraordinaries, but it was also a blind spot in a certain sense. It looked like a trick, but it was actually the optimal solution obtained by combining all kinds of intelligence and information. Right now, Luo Nan had 2 different methods of dealing with Snake Tongue and Fan Lu. He used a method of close contact with Snake Tongue. However, he didn't have any hope that she could keep the secret. All he wanted was a channel of information that could influence Gongqi's judgment. However, the current situation was so smooth that he was a little surprised. Let's leave it at that for now. As for Fan Lu, Luo Yuan's chauffeur, he was a perfect entry point. He had been following Luo Yuan for more than 10 years, and was definitely a trusted aide. Even if his aptitude was mediocre and he was unwilling to undergo genetic modification, his status was neither high nor low. However, his understanding of Luo Yuan was far greater than anyone else's. Luo Nan dug up a lot of interesting information from Luo Nan's dream. And this was under circumstances where Luo Nan had clearly taken some mental defensive measures. Moreover, although Luo Nan used the psychic diagram as an effective method of gathering and analyzing intelligence, he wouldn't wholeheartedly rely on this method to conquer the world. Once the psychic map had a clear direction and center of gravity, the entire world's mental sensing network would be put to good use. Luo Yuan's senses were far too sharp. Luo Nan couldn't follow him all the time to avoid attracting attention. But Luo Nan didn't need to worry about anything here on Fan Road. Luo Nan temporarily set aside his cultivation. Aside from the news related to the auction, he also received more concrete feedback on the actual scene. Right now it was early morning in Ban City. Inland, whose city was roughly 2 time zones away. Right now it was midnight. Fan Lu, the target he was paying attention to, had already been waiting quietly at Hu City's airport for 3 hours. Finally, the transport plane from the wilderness had arrived. Fan Lu was involved in a large transaction, and it was a crucial link in the treat plan. Fan Lu personally handled all the procedures of receiving, inspecting, transferring, and so on. From the moment the transport plane arrived, Fan Lu and his attendant, Little Zhao, didn't have a moment of leisure. Separate the equipment and data. Okay. Are the appraisers from the Toyama auction house here yet? The transfer vehicle is waiting over there. Our people don't get involved. Let the people from the Toyama auction house handle it. This matter has nothing to do with us from the moment the equipment leaves the transport plane. Everything was busy but not messy. While the appraisers from Toyama were nervously inspecting the equipment and data, Fan Lu had already finished his work. He let out a long sigh and even had the leisure to lament. I haven't seen these familiar old objects in 20 years. Speaking of which, I actually didn't notice them at all when they were placed in that place. Little Zhao went. But before he could respond, he was rudely pushed to the side. Fan Lu turned his head in horror, but he saw a fellow with a deformed head suddenly jump out. The fellow's long and narrow eyes stared straight at him. Contact the next transport plane for me. I'll go with it. What? Fan Lu didn't understand for a moment. He was even more baffled as to why this fellow, the horned demon, suddenly followed him. Speaking of which, although the transaction with the Toyama auction house was done under the name of the horned demon, it actually had nothing to do with him. The airport wouldn't even notify him of the transfer, but this fellow, the horned demon, gave a rare explanation. I suddenly had some inspiration in that laboratory. I want to go there to verify it. I'll take the next transport plane there. Fan Lu felt his scalp hurt. It's not like you haven't been to that place before. It is not big, and now half of it has collapsed. If such a big transport plane goes there, it will definitely be empty. How can there be another one? Then arrange one for me. Hiss, you know the environment over there, right? I don't need to emphasize how unstable it is. This transport plane is originally rushing for time. They are waiting at the last moment. Now even if I arrange one for you, there is a high probability that it will be transferred again. You won't be able to find the entrance even if you go there. Why bother? You idiot! Why do you care about me? I was the one who found the entrance. Fan Lu's good intentions were trampled into the mud by the horned demon. No matter how good-tempered he was, he couldn't help but explode. You found it? Ha, as early as 20 years ago, we were there. I was also the one who found it 20 years later. Hee hee, that place has always been under Wu Jun's control. You snatched it. That was also found by me. Fan Lu finally realized that he had nothing to say to a madman, so he could only use the delaying tactic. I have to inform Mr. Luo Yuan first. As Fan Lu said, he turned around to leave, but his neck was clasped by the fingers of the horned demon when his body only turned halfway, and he was forcibly pulled back. As the force penetrated, the blood vessels, nerves, and bones in his throat were squeezed and twisted. His vision turned black, and he almost fainted. "What are you doing?" Xiao Zhao was shocked. He wanted to come over to save him, but he was kicked by the horned demon and flew 10 steps away. He fainted directly. This time, the appraisal and transfer work on the transport plane was suddenly interrupted. Several appraisers from the Toyama auction house not far away were stunned. The security personnel they brought raised the firearms in their hands and aimed at the horned demon who had already lifted the person halfway. The atmosphere was so tense that it could collapse at any time. Damn. Fan Lu knew that the horned demon was a dog. He would turn his face at any time, but he didn't expect the most ruthless bite to bite him directly. His vision turned with difficulty, trying to save himself. The security of the Toyama auction house couldn't be counted on, but at this time, he was on the transport plane. Some of the passengers here were the products of the gene exchange. Damn it, with his current state, unless Luo Yuan's attention was on him, there was no chance at all. The horned demon completely ignored the outside environment and the changes in the atmosphere. He only put his deformed and distorted face in front of Fan Lu. "Don't you understand? I found it and I should have special rights there." Fan Lu's brain was already hypoxic. He slapped the horned demon's arm hard, but the latter just talked to himself. "These days I have a lot of inspiration, especially when I am dreaming. I can feel some kind of wonderful guidance from those flying fragments. They may combine into the most wonderful answer at any time. Do you understand that feeling? Oh, I forgot that you can't speak." The horned demon finally let go, and Fan Lu fell directly to the ground. His whole body was soft, and he only knew how to cough and retch. The horned demon didn't mind squatting beside him and patted his shoulder and back. "I know you are very busy doing odd jobs. It is very difficult for you to understand this kind of mysterious state, so you don't need to waste any more effort. I make a request, and you just need to agree. Everyone can relax." Fan Lu repeatedly chopped the horned demon 100 times, 1,000 times in his heart, but he still had to act nice on the outside. He made his final persuasion with a hoarse voice. "You can wait a little longer. In a month, no, in half a month, you will have a lot of time to research. With that baby who is still drinking milk? I'm saying that you don't need to try your luck and find the door." The horned demon's finger pressed onto Fan Lu's neck. "I say, little Fan, even though we have been kindred spirits quite a few times, you still don't understand. Luck is my attribute. You don't need to worry about such a boring thing. Give me a definite answer. Do you agree or not?" Fan Lu coughed a few more times. He wanted to speak again, but his head had already been forcefully snapped down by the horned demon's monstrous strength. He nodded twice. The horned demon's voice came over. "Excellent. Happy cooperation." Thousands of kilometers away, Luo Nan began to chuckle. Inlu, who was right next to him, massaging his shoulders, felt strange. She leaned back slightly. "Mister?" The soft sensation on Luo Nan's shoulders, and even the side of his cheeks left. His mind instantly became empty, but it was soon filled with more important matters. "You said that you had spare materials for the transmission array you built last time." "Yes." Chapter 748. The medium-sized transport plane flew through the night, advancing all the way inland, but in the end, it still couldn't outrun the sun that rose from the horizon. The transport plane that flew all the way from Huqing finally arrived at the relevant airspace when the first light of dawn silently spread over thousands of miles of wasteland. From beginning to end, the cabin of the transport plane was empty. Everyone was in the cockpit. Of course, there were only 3 people on the entire plane: the pilot, co-pilot, and the centaur. As a bad customer who forced his way onto the plane, the centaur was self-aware and clearly showed his distrust of the 2 crew members. He was nailed in the cockpit until the transport plane arrived at the destination he hoped for. What was strange was that the cabin was empty along the way, and the cockpit was quiet. The centaur, who always had the talkative attribute, actually kept his mouth shut. If one didn't look back, one wouldn't be able to feel his existence. If silence could be accumulated, the transport plane would have crashed halfway due to severe overload. After finally reaching the target airspace, the Centaur finally said, "Descend." The transport plane penetrated the clouds and continued to descend. Looking out from the porthole, the slightly undulating red soil of the wasteland below was already the kind that the Centaur was familiar with. He looked at the instrument panel on the transport plane and converted the angle of the sun. The Centaur was finally satisfied and patted the shoulders of the two pilots. "Very good, maintain this height. We will hover for a while. Pay attention to the mutants. It shouldn't be a problem for you." As the Centaur said, at an altitude of about 6,000 to 7,000 meters, the population and number of flying mutants couldn't be underestimated. Hovering around was not a good choice. However, neither the pilot nor the co-pilot spoke. They just followed the Centaur's instructions and began to hover at high altitude. They skillfully avoided several waves of flying mutants that passed by. This continued for about 20 minutes before the Centaur finally stopped. "Very good, very agile." The pilot and co-pilot remained silent. As the products of the gene exchange, they were the most capable subordinates and executors. The Centaur's praise was completely wrong. Of course, the Centaur didn't care. After saying that, he left the cockpit and walked into the rear cabin. At the same time, he gestured for the cabin door to be opened. "I won't trouble you with the landing. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. See you next time." As the hatch opened, the cold and strong airflow from the high altitude went straight in. The Centaur faced the whistling wind, closed his eyes, opened his arms, and jumped down without hesitation. Only his sharp whistle was left in the cabin. In the cockpit, a radar alarm sounded. The co-pilot could clearly see through the monitor screen that almost at the moment when the Centaur jumped off the transport plane, a huge shadow swept past the bottom of the fuselage and converged with the Centaur's figure. Then it dived at high speed. The pilot and co-pilot looked at each other. Without saying anything, they flew the plane back. The Centaur, who made a leap of faith from the transport plane, stood steadily on the back of a pterosaur. This high-altitude mutant, known for its ferocity, was uncomfortable with the sudden weight on its body, but it only slightly twisted its long neck and maintained a relatively stable posture. Then it spiraled down. After just 3 minutes, the Centaur truly set foot on the sun-covered wasteland, and the pterosaur, which was a temporary vehicle, flew back into the sky and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Deterred by the huge size of this high-altitude predator, dust and smoke rose from all directions in the wilderness. Some of the small animals that were swimming around in the surroundings fled in all directions. Some of them lost their normal rhythm and quickly became the breakfast of the strong. The food chain of survival of the fittest was simple and straightforward. It didn't require any brains at all, and it was most favored by the Centaur. He looked around and glanced at this wilderness full of wildness and vitality. Of course, it was full of cruelty. He grinned and stood there with his arms crossed, waiting quietly. In just a few minutes, the pterosaur just now returned. From its broad shoulders, 3 figures jumped down one after another. One of them just landed on the ground, and he took the opportunity to punch directly into the rippling red ground. Half of his arm was deeply stuck in the ground. He then raised his hand, and his fingers had already pierced between the head and neck of a giant viper that was as thick as a human thigh. Red and green body fluids mixed together, flowing on the snake that had been caught but was still twitching violently. Then the snake was thrown everywhere. Amidst the protests of the others, the snake catcher didn't say a word. He stuffed the fat viper together with his own arm into the long mouth of the pterosaur that landed next to him. The sharp teeth of the sharp-beaked pterodactyl habitually scraped the food, instantly turning the venomous snake into strips of meat. When the tip of the teeth scratched the snake catcher's arm, which was even thicker, it did not leave the slightest mark. After feeding, the snake catcher slapped the pterosaur's head, almost causing this top meat-eater that looked like the reincarnation of a dinosaur to fall down. So, the pterosaur soon flapped its wings and flew into the air again. In the blink of an eye, it flew high and disappeared. It felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from the completion of the mission, but it also felt as if it had fled far away. The snake catcher was undoubtedly the strongest among the group. The centaur probably only reached a position slightly below his chest. When the sharp-beaked Quetzalcoatlus was used as a vehicle, It probably put most of its strength on this person. It was only natural that it ate the food he fed. The centaur was quite afraid of this giant. It kept staring at him, and after confirming that the giant didn't say anything else after feeding, it turned its gaze to the other two. Apart from the giant, there was also a middle-aged man who was as thin as a monkey. As soon as he landed, he squatted by the side and fanned himself. His curled-up body felt like it was too small to fit on the giant's shoulder. His actions were extremely jumpy, which was really unworthy of his face that had been through the vicissitudes of life. He stuck out his tongue and shouted, "Hot, hot, hot." His face was red as if he had a heat stroke or taken drugs. The centaur was more familiar with this person, so he took the initiative to greet. "Monkey, how many did you drink today?" Monkey spat, 10 little blue balls. I was brought over by Fatty Dragon before I could get it. I can turn the earth upside down now." As he spoke, he glanced at the giant who created the shadow on the side, but he didn't continue. As for the last one, even in the wilderness he was still wearing a suit as if he had just walked out of a business banquet. A bow tie, a watch, and a pair of shiny leather shoes. Everything about him made him look like a well-dressed person. At this time, the fastidious person looked down at his watch and frowned. "We are about 20 minutes later than the scheduled time. There's no time to chat now. Remember, we are here to receive the secret auction results. It has nothing to do with the centaur. That's why, you stubborn Fatty Dragon. You should have listened to me just now and released the germs separately. That way, everyone wouldn't have to trudge around on foot. You should know that every minute in the wilderness, the amount of viruses and germs we inhale is more than 200 times that of a big city. And this damn soil." With that said, the fastidious person turned around to leave, but before he could take a step, his shoulder was hooked by the centaur. The two men's faces were almost stuck together. The latter didn't care how disgusted the fastidious person looked and whispered in his ear, "I heard that your good friend Brain Demon died. It doesn't matter if he died, but where is Wu Jun or a family that can threaten me? This is your plan, right, Flower Sausage? Call Jingxin." Fastidious person, Jingxin pushed the centaur away in annoyance. He even used his fingers to wipe off the dust on his shoulder. There are always accidents in everything. We have been trying our best to find her these few days. We even caught 2 of the upper echelons of the small parish for questioning, but Wu Jun seems to have disappeared. Then what about her child? Brain Demon did it personally, but I heard that he didn't even leave a complete corpse. This is an accident among accidents. We still don't know what kind of powerful enemy centaur encountered. We can only determine from the traces of the Fusang tree that this is a very powerful psychic. Even after Brain Demon used the Fusang tree system to exert his strength, he still crushed him to death like a bug. It's very likely to be a transcendent. If it's a hidden trump card of the Xielua parish, it will definitely be a very terrifying matter. I don't care who killed the Brain Demon or how he died. I only care about where Wu Jun and her child that you promised me are. That child should have left the U-Hole market. You have to know that the surrounding environment is too complicated, so we haven't found him yet. Alright, don't be angry. I admit that the conditions I promised you were greatly discounted. The parish will make up for the difference. Jingxin revealed a perfect and sincere smile. You cannot trust me, but there's still Maho, Fatty Dragon, and the Amaterasu parish. After so many years, we should have established mutual trust, right? Centaur stared at Jingxin without even blinking. Jingxin straightened his face and put on a more habitual serious expression. What the 4 of us need to do now is to squeeze out the value of that laboratory before the inexplicable treat plan is activated. This is a bet on the reputation of you, me, and the parish. We have also opened up a connection with the true upper echelons. The dark network auction went very smoothly. We just need to get the rest of the money now. Centaur chuckled. Now that the equipment and information have been dismantled and taken away, without Wu Jun, even if we can enter the door, there's no way to find the truly valuable things from those fragments. As long as she enters, it's victory. Centaur, my dear friend, you have to understand that Luo Yuandao's laboratory is just the entrance to a huge maze. I believe that in his years of research, there are indeed some techniques that can capture valuable fragments in the equipment he taught Wu Jun, But that is only a limited method to increase the probability. In essence, they are still trying their luck. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the power to protect themselves after 20 years. Jingxin was trying his best to brainwash Centaur with his glib tongue. Fat Dragon suddenly crossed his arms, signaling for the dangerous topic to stop for the time being. At the same time, he said in a deep voice. Chapter 749. 3,500 kilometers away from some inland wasteland, Ban City's time zone was pushed forward by 3 hours. When the first glimmer of dawn appeared over the wasteland, the sun was already high in the sky over Ban City. Today was Monday, the first working day after the weekend. Due to the barbell structure of the city, which was short from north to south and long from east to west, the many layers of traffic in the east and west of Ban City sunk into a busy and congested predicament. Temporary drainage channels were opened on North Mountain Lake. The military and police were mobilized on a large scale to suppress the mutant population on the lake, allowing for flying cars to shuttle through. The humming sound of engines resonated through the horizon. The tranquil and leisurely scenery of last night was nowhere to be seen. During this busy time, the 2 passengers on the yacht drifting on North Mountain Lake entered a working state. The sunlit area on the top deck was supposed to be a leisure area, but it had now become a temporary work area. Whether it was Luonan or Yinlu, they were both immersed in writing and data. They were extremely busy. Luonan had been writing and drawing from the moment he entered this state. His brush moved like it was flying. He sketched one character after another and handed them over to Yinlu for intelligence gathering and analysis. Actually, the technology of telepathic transcription had long since matured in this era. Luonan could completely use the relevant technology to reproduce the images of his mental clairvoyance into electronic information and search it directly. No matter how lifelike the sketches were, they were still separated by a layer. This kind of method affected Yinli's efficiency quite a bit. It made her do a lot of extra work. However, the secretary had to accept the willful choice of the boss. Yinli didn't have any thoughts of complaint in her heart. After all, this was a real-time image from several thousand kilometers away. Even though Yinlu knew that Luonan possessed the ability to mentally travel 10,000 kilometers, it was still hard for her mind to not be shaken when she truly experienced it from a different angle. It was still the same saying. Omnipresent. It was practically omniscient. It was omnipotent. Plus, Yinlu knew that Luonan's sketching technique was related to his clairvoyance and analysis of his targets. It contained deeper details. Therefore, she didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. She just earnestly sorted out the images Luonan drew and organized them. At the same time, she mobilized the Blood Flame Order's accumulated database over the years to distinguish, analyze, and determine the nature of these characters. She promptly reported them. The one in the Jeep, Kevin? Gardner, a self-proclaimed ranger with a B-rank fleshly body. Aside from close combat, he was proficient in all sorts of military equipment, including all sorts of exoskeleton armors. It wouldn't be surprising if he could drive the Deep Blue Walker. We always suspected that he had a military background, but even when we were at our best with the military, we couldn't find any concrete evidence. The person controlling the glider to descend is nicknamed Hua Dian. He's a very famous spirit energy detective in the industry, and he can basically be confirmed to be a spirit medium. Usually he would only take money, but this time, his motive was quite suspicious. This barefoot ascetic priest should be Anthony. Although he did not appear in the mainstream circles of the inner plane, he had always taken it upon himself to spread the gospel. His prestige in the world of religions was high, and some parishes even hoped to confer him the title of saint, making him the main guardian saint of the extraordinary domain. It was said that he had been searching for the holy relic, hoping to find the traces of holiness in the changes of the new era. There are many believers of traditional religions who hold this belief, and have even formed a secret organization. Anthony is likely to be one of them. Yinlu felt more and more baffled after finding the information of the 3 participants. The backgrounds of these 3 people are quite complicated. Aren't the horned demons looking for trouble by asking them to come? They're not complicated and they can't. They don't have the guts to participate in the dark network auction of the Horned Demons. Luonan responded without thinking. His mental sensing network continued to capture the target and focus. He didn't just give the target a quick sketch during this process. Instead, he started from various angles, referring to the information Inlu provided, and even starting from the feeling of a split second. He sought to capture the fundamental characteristics of the target. Not only did this fill the living starry sky with material, but it also served as preparation for the future drawing of the psychic diagram. They weren't the only ones. Although they had different standpoints and positions, the Horned Demons were doing similar work 3,000 kilometers away. They relied on Fatty Dragon's special ability to control the surrounding mutants. This ability appeared to be quite common. Luonan had personally witnessed the deaths of 2 ability users of this type. Puppeteer had died to the Devil Ray's bite, and Brain Demon had died even more miserably. They were all like this. Even Luonan himself had this type of ability in a certain sense. However, Fatty Dragon, this big guy, appeared to be much calmer than the other 2 who had died. His consciousness seemed to be able to jump back and forth between multiple mutants at any time. It was a bit like when Luonan's soul was in an out-of-body state. Mr. Bai had once misinterpreted it as the attached soul state. He could switch back and forth quite freely, seeming to be able to jump back and forth within a radius of 100 kilometers. Even with the restriction of needing a life vessel, Fatty Dragon's monitoring range was the widest that Luonan had ever seen, aside from himself and a few other mental extraordinaries. Anyone would think that Fatty Dragon was of the fleshly side just by looking at his build, but his attainments in the mental side were quite deep. Luonan took the information provided by Inlu and sized it up seriously. Inlu explained in a soft voice to the side, providing some unclear details of the information. Fatty Dragon is the backbone of the Amaterasu order. He is also one of the high-end thugs. He was mentally retarded in his early years, but the true god of the Amaterasu order personally enlightened him and unlocked his innate talent. Since then he has been out of control. In a short 6 or 7 years, he has already stably occupied the top 200 of the various inner world rankings, and he is still rising. In terms of combat strength alone, some people call him the Eye of Truth Fairchild of the Order of Justice, and the Secret Wheel of Life Master Fan of the Eye of Secret Contract. They are known as the 3 heroes of the Secret Order. And these 3 seem to be drifting away from the core decision-making circle for various reasons. In any case, Fatty Dragon's existence has clearly raised the level of this transaction. Luonan nodded. So this person needs to maintain a distance from the Horned Demon. Otherwise, the other participants will certainly have misgivings. Inlu also agreed with this judgment. She then said, as for the other 2, Monkey Horse was born in the wilderness. He is lecherous and bloodthirsty. He is a notorious savage among the vagabonds. He is also a frequent guest on the official wanted list. I don't know when he joined the Amaterasu order. This time he probably needs to conceal his identity and give others a surprise attack. As for that Jingxin, it's quite strange for him to have a relationship with the Amaterasu order. His official identity is a wilderness ecology expert at Hood's Wilderness Laboratory. At the same time, he is also a member of the Ability User Society. He also has a professional technical position at headquarters. I'm afraid that Abner's expression won't look too good when this news gets out. Abner was the president of the Ability User Society headquarters. He was nominally the representative and leader of the entire world's ability users. Luonan had already seen him a few times from afar through the mental sensing network. He could more or less imagine what that person's expression would look like when he said that. He grinned and then furrowed his brows. The Amaterasu order has pulled out many hidden strings. They are completely determined to win this transaction. If they have this kind of determination, they can just take out the money to bid for the bid. They can also directly cooperate with the Dark Hand behind the scenes. With the Horned Demon in the middle, they should know each other's background. Inlu was unable to answer this question. Luonan didn't expect to obtain an answer. He quickly raised another question. How can anyone get involved in the Amaterasu order? Let's not talk about the Horned Demon. Fatty Dragon's background is simple. But Jingxin is a member of the society with a high position. Brain demon and horse monkey are vagrants of the wilderness. The doctrine of education without discrimination, Tianqi true soul, is just a random patchwork. There's nothing special about it. Snake Tongue's myriad spirit order can be modified and used without a single flaw. Luonan had more or less experienced the atmosphere of the Amaterasu Order's headquarters these past few days in Ban City. The management was really quite loose. Large and small overground and underground orders were allowed to grow in Ban City, the core region of the order. For example, Zuowei, a mutant that clearly possessed basic intelligence and had already become the core of a small order, lived next to the residential area and allowed them to do as they pleased. It looked quite impressive, but in Spring City, they had to obtain the holy cloak of the Xieluo order as soon as possible. They didn't even hesitate to dig up the foundation of the order. Luonan still wasn't clear on what kind of logic they followed. Because Luonan was racking his brains for the Amaterasu order, the members of the Amaterasu order fell into a rather headache-inducing situation, as more and more people appeared to participate in the transaction. Aside from Anthony, Hua Dian, and Gardner, there were other people approaching from different directions and distances. With so many people, it was hard to avoid some bumping and bumping. *CKME. Black Mist. That bastard who likes to put curses on people. Back in the wilderness, that fellow tormented me until I peed my pants. The horse monkey was thick-skinned. He spoke of his family's embarrassing past like a fart, but the hatred in his words caused the vast, sunny wasteland to seem a bit gloomy. He appeared in a spiritual body state. Jingxin grasped the main point. This fellow is clearly overconfident. You must know that there are 10 people participating in the transaction, including us, right? The horned demon nodded in confirmation. Jingxin continued. Most of the 10 people should be on the mental side. They are scheming against the unsuspecting. All of them have the ability to deal with him. It's all too easy for a monkey to take revenge. Jingxin consciously assumed the position of the brains of this four-man group. He pacified Horse Monkey and reminded his companions of a more critical issue. Pay attention to the motorcycle rider that's following Gardner. I can't see his face clearly right now, but I remember the dagger behind his waist. Cui Qinghe, a swordsman from Ji City. He's proficient in close combat assassination. However, he has another identity. He's an Ablatum Knight. Li Taisheng, the Secret Covenant First Ablatum of the Order of Justice, came to Chan City to negotiate. This person was one of the attendants. Before the Horned Demon and the others could digest this, they heard another question. Who is this person? The one who spoke was Fatty Dragon. He rarely asked a question. At the same time, he used a secret technique to share the image he sensed with his companions. This backpacker. Is he part of the transaction? At nearly the same time, Luo Nan, who was over 3,000 kilometers away, locked onto the last person. The instant the focus was completed, Luo Nan's pen tip froze. Chapter 750. The constantly approaching traders made it necessary for Horned Demon and his group to disperse as soon as possible to avoid being caught plotting behind the scenes. Because of this, every problem had to be resolved in a race against time. Jingxin, who assumed the position of think tank, felt that the search efficiency of the Order's database was terrible. 40 to 50 words popped out from the gaps of his teeth before the corresponding information appeared. Wan Ta, the director of the Orchid Town Welfare House in the Forest Wall district of Xia City, the founder of the Order of Creation. Currently, the Order has 27 members and 2 suspected ability users. What the hell? Fortunately, the follow-up information was somewhat valuable. He has a good relationship with Luo Nan. Xie Junping, an official member of the Order of Creation, is Luo Nan's best friend. They communicate frequently. Jingxin raised his head and cast a horrified look at Horned Demon. You actually let this kind of person participate in the auction, and even let him pay a deposit. Are you sure that this Dean Wan doesn't have Luo Nan, Ouyang Chun, Wu Jiong, or all of them behind him? Horned Demon was also horrified. Are you kidding me? I didn't allow the IP of Xia City to join at all. This Dean Welfare House must have used some sort of method. Horse Monkey had a big heart. He even comforted the two. Xia City isn't a monolithic block. The information that flows out from there every year is worth at least $1 billion. Who knows how many so-called insiders have gotten rich? Look, isn't Horned Demon the living proof? Horned Demon and Jingxin ignored him. Jingxin asked Fatty Dragon, "Are you sure there's no one hiding behind this guy?" Fatty Dragon said in a muffled voice, "He himself is very troublesome. He has already sensed the surveillance carrier." The gazes of the few people intersected before finally focusing on Horned Demon. Horned Demon was silent for about 3 seconds before he burst out laughing. If Luo Nan was called over ahead of time, many people would have very interesting expressions. But from my point of view, that kid would rather kill his way over than let an inexplicable person come over to scout the situation. Xia City has a lot of plastic brotherhood. Don't rush to a conclusion. The current situation is very complicated. It's much more complicated than we imagined. Jingxin went through the information of the participants again. The more he thought about it, the deeper the waters were. However, it was impossible to turn back now. Otherwise, evacuation would be a big problem. There's not enough time. Let's disperse first. Fatty Dragon, set up the communication network. Everyone can contact each other at any time. First, do the work on the surface. Then, we can sort out the rest step by step. This was the safest way, and it was also the last resort. Other than the Centaur, the 3 members of the Amaterasu sect covered their tracks. With the support of Fatty Dragon's huge sensing range of nearly 100 kilometers, they staggered from the direction of the people coming from each direction. The Centaur stayed in the same place. He first pondered, then he squatted down and grabbed a handful of red soil from the ground. There was still the body fluid of the snake that was killed by Fat Dragon. He stuck out his tongue, and used the tip of his tongue to roll up the mixture of soil and viper gravy. He tasted it carefully and swallowed it. An ominous fishy smell. Malice is approaching. The Centaur's mood became a little anxious. He stood up and walked around the hole made by the fist on the ground several times. As a psychic, he tried to pinpoint the source of the malice, but his spiritual compass seemed to have been blown away by a strong wind. It was inaccurate. For such a situation to occur, it was either that the other party's strength was far above his, or that there was more than one source of malicious intent, or both. Either way, it was far from what he had expected. The Centaur stretched out his hand, and the limbs in his vision were trembling slightly. "We're all in place. We're turning back." Jingxin reported the latest situation on behalf of Fatty Dragon, who was not good with words. "The light spots on the glider should be able to capture your position. Gardner, who is in front, will arrive in about 15 minutes. The black fog is also trying to sense from afar. Are you ready?" The Centaur was still looking at his arm. After a few seconds he grinned. "It doesn't feel good. However, when I think about how they have to search for the laboratory door from scratch, I feel a lot better." Jingxin ignored the crazy words that followed and voiced his opinion. "I don't feel good either. Apart from us, half of the remaining 6 people had powerful backgrounds or were suspects. This looked more like the inspection of the goods before the auction. Before you exposed your information, the real seller would have already sold the entire process to the last detail. Centaur, my old friend, you might be dancing in the palm of someone else's hand. I hope you don't drag us into it." F***CK. No matter what, it was impossible for the Centaur to back down now. Just as he was speaking, the people participating in the transaction were arriving one after another. He had already seen the dust stirred up by Gardner's off-road vehicle, and the trajectory of the light spots glider hovering in the air. In other directions that he could not see, layers of complex thoughts were surging up. Just as he predicted with his psychic connection, there was a serious lack of goodwill. About half an hour later, all the participants in the transaction had arrived at the location where the Centaur was. Different people, the same scrutiny, and the natural resistance and pressure in the unfamiliar environment and atmosphere of suspicion caused everyone to naturally distance themselves. They were scattered in an area with a diameter of nearly 100 meters, only surrounding the Centaur in the middle. The 3 people from the Amaterasu cult showed no flaws. They were scattered in different directions, intertwining with the other 6 people. Those who knew each other, like Jingxin and Chuiqinghe, nodded to each other. Those who hated each other, like Ma Hou, looked ferociously at the black mist, as if he wanted to devour it. This was not a disguise, but a performance of his true colors. But in the end, all the focus was on the centaur's head, which made the deformed skull in front of his forehead ache. The pressure was huge, but the more it was like this, the more excited the centaur became. In this state, the centaur's craziness was finally completely stimulated. Under his feet was the red earth wasteland covered with wrinkles, but it felt like he was standing on the glorious stage of an opera house. He didn't deliberately face anyone. Instead, he chose to turn his back to the sun, allowing the rising sun to gild his body. Then he began his speech. Everyone, it's a pleasure to meet you here. Logically speaking, I should have given a passionate speech, but based on the foundation of our relationship, there was basically no need for that. As I have written in advance in the instructions for the secret visit auction, this is a transaction of one is willing to take the hit, and the other is willing to take the hit. In this transaction, I may be a shameless robber, but I may also be an idiot who buys the casket and returns the pearls. You may spend a huge sum of money to pay the deposit, but you may also find a treasure that will make people envious. At the end of the day, this is a transaction full of gambling. It is an exciting and unhealthy relationship. So I must say the ugly words first. I must confirm again that you all already understand the background of this transaction. At this time, Gardner, who was wearing a leather coat and sitting on the hood of the off-road vehicle, raised his hand like a good student, indicating that he had something to say. The centaur gestured for him to speak. Gardner's skin was a weather-polished dark red, and he wore sunglasses. His whole body was dark under the sun, but when he grinned, his teeth were white and very eye-catching. And his words seemed to be even more attractive. The background you are talking about, are you referring to the lucky incident of being a flag-waving minion, but accidentally signing the final large auction commission agreement? As soon as he said that, sparse laughter came from all directions. Some were serious, and some were not amused, and the people who laughed included Jingxin and Horse Monkey. What F*** King good acting skills. The centaur's cheeks twitched twice, and his eyes slid across Gardner's face like a venomous snake. The latter still maintained a bright smile, not caring at all. It was also at this moment that on the Amaterasu Parish's secret communication network, Jingxin once again announced that his judgment was correct. Look, this is basically an inspection team. Perhaps behind these people are the buyers who were prepared to pay in that damned auction. After mocking the centaur impudently, Horse Monkey locked onto his enemy again and chuckled. I don't know about the others, but that guy from Black Fog, unless he transforms into the world's top actor in his spirit body state, I dare to swear that this guy's gambling addiction must have flared up, and he just barged in. He doesn't know the twists and turns inside, so now he's stupid, and the frequency at which he detects others at the mental level has increased several times. Is this good news? Jingxin reluctantly responded out of friendship. Of course it's good news. I think he's now a little girl who's been stuffed into a men's prison. What a perfect test subject. We have to keep him, don't scare him away. The centaur didn't comment on this. He had his own thoughts and rhythm of speech. Therefore he could endure the ridicule around him and maintain a basic commercial face. It's good that everyone understands the background and has expectations. It can save me a lot of saliva. But according to the most basic professional ethics, no matter what kind of cognitive standpoint you have, I still have to emphasize the essence of this transaction. The opportunity one provide you is just to taste the so-called fresh flavor before the real carnival of capital, and your bid won't get real goods and services. What you get is only an opportunity, and it's an illusory opportunity. Maybe you're lucky enough to reach the sky in a single bound. Maybe you're unlucky enough to have the corpses dealt with later. At this moment someone spoke again, but his voice was a little strange, because it was Black Fog who spoke. As the only participant who came with a spirit body, he was like his name, like a dark cloud that had sunk to the ground. At this moment, he was using his mind to interfere with the material level, vibrating the air molecules to form a voice. You don't have to be so secretive. I just want to ask, as long as you pay the balance, can you enter Luo Yuandao's wilderness laboratory to explore and search? The information and items found inside can also be taken away at will? Before he finished speaking, Black Fog's heart sank. Because at this moment, more than a dozen gazes shifted over at the same time, and there was a subtle change. Black Fog was a senior B-level powerhouse after all, so he didn't lack experience and scheming. From his point of view, the changes in the gazes of the people around him, even if there were some differences in the details, were similar in essence. There was no need to be precise. Just working together itself was tantamount to excluding him. And it also confirmed the guess in his heart. He had stumbled into a deadly vortex. Mada was annoyed. It was also his fault for getting carried away by the recent abnormally popular formatting theory, cage theory, and configuration theory. When he heard that it was the possible origin of these theories, he excitedly paid the deposit, thinking that it was a gamble to cut the queue, but he forgot to refer to similar incidents, which were all earth-shattering. This was not a place for a small investor like him to mix in. Not to mention he had encountered a troublesome old enemy like Ma Ho. Bad luck. Bad luck. Bad luck. Black Fog already had the intention to retreat. At this moment, the horned demon also responded lazily. I've said it before, it's just an opportunity. In fact, your luck wasn't too good at the beginning. There was a small problem with the extra benefits I prepared for you, so I had to cancel it. This also caused us to have to put in more effort to enter and exit Luo Yuandao's laboratory. Black Fog couldn't go around with the horned demon anymore, but he couldn't step too deep either. He could only act appropriately and pretend to be anxious. Speak human language. Where is Luo Yuandao's laboratory? The horned demon's expression didn't change. It's right where I'm standing, within a radius of 300 kilometers. Black Fog didn't even need to pretend. His spirit body was greatly shaken, and the sound wave formed by interference was like a loudspeaker, buzzing. You tricked us. With a radius of 300 kilometers, this is the area of a large metropolitan area. You want to play hide and seek here until the end of time? I've said it before, one is willing to take the hit and the other is willing to take the hit. Damn it, you're going to scare this coward away. Maho scratched his ears and cheeks as he watched from the side. He couldn't help but forcefully correct the horned demon's words through the internal communication network. Jingxin persuaded Maho to maintain restraint. Black Fog has long wanted to run. It's useless to be tactful. Besides, it doesn't matter if he runs away. You can chase him back. If you feel that your strength isn't enough, I think Fat Dragon will be happy to help without affecting the mission. He has always had an appetite for this kind of spirit body. Fat Dragon didn't respond. As for the horned demon, he seemed to be looking back. He raised 3 fingers and made an oath. I can swear with the spiritual perception of a psychic that Luo Yuandao's laboratory is indeed in this area. However, it is affected by a special force and drifts erratically. However, it is definitely traceable. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to go to the auction. I will inform you of this news and join the search team. If it is found, I will share it with everyone for free. Having said that, he chuckled again. Actually, after finding it, it can't be hidden. At present, the laboratory's anchoring device has been dismantled and transported. If you want to open the gap, the collision of space-time and the interaction between the mental and material levels will be very spectacular. You should be worried that the Toyama auction house will come back for trouble instead of wasting precious time and doubting my information. The horned demon's solemn vow still showed a certain degree of persuasiveness. However, no matter what he said, Black Fog would never stay here. At this moment, the horned demon's pointed words also came over. Anyone can leave at any time, no problem. However, as stated in the event description, the balance is not collected and the deposit is not refunded. Diagonally opposite, the psionic detective Hua Dian, who had been silent since he arrived, also raised his hand, indicating that he had a question to consult. F*CK the deposit, F*CK the F*CK opportunity. Black Fog directly retreated, and the horned demon answered the question. This was the best opportunity to leave. Didn't Maho, that son of a bitch, stared at him with venomous eyes? His decision was obviously correct. Just as he retreated, Maho's figure in the distance jumped as if he was about to chase, but he forcefully stopped with an unwilling expression. Such a reaction made Black Fog's heart turn cold. This son of a bitch has an accomplice. Otherwise, with that temper, how could he hold back his fierceness? Without time to rejoice, Black Fog used the advantage of the spirit body's high-speed flight and retreated with all his strength. In a short time, he escaped hundreds of kilometers away. This should be a safe distance. Among that group of people, there were no extraordinaires who could spread the sensor network over hundreds of kilometers. Black Fog relaxed a little when he didn't see the enemy chasing him. He temporarily slowed down and diverted his attention to plan his next move. At this moment, a shockwave suddenly cut through the void. It was so strong and sharp that even his mind was in turmoil, giving him a fright. An expert had crossed the border. The shockwave came and left abruptly. Although it was strong, it left no traces. However, there was a penetrating and sharp intent that went straight to the depths of his spirit body. This wasn't an illusion. Black Fog seemed to be hit by a strong beam of light in an instant. The light shone through the bottom structure of his spirit body, and he felt that there was almost no privacy. Such an impact, if it landed, would definitely be a first-class spiritual killing method. Even in the out-of-body state, Black Fog evoked a hair-raising memory of his physical body. His spirit body froze in the air for almost a minute. After confirming that he was not injured, he finally knew how to think. Which deity had arrived? Looking at the direction, he should be going to the horned demon's side. Forget it, it's just a passing, it has nothing to do with me. Black Fog was sure that today was the day of his great misfortune. Everything was inappropriate. He couldn't stay any longer, so he suppressed all distracting thoughts, calmed his mind, and fled far away without looking back. After Black Fog fled for another 10 kilometers, a raven commonly seen in the wilderness arrived late. It arrived above the area where Black Fog had been stunned for a long time. It circled several times but found nothing. Fuck, he ran away. After Monkey got the news, he didn't have the mood to hide anymore. In front of everyone, he stomped his feet heavily. However, no one paid attention to him. Most people were communicating with the horned demon about the details of this transaction, preparing for the so-called gambling on luck later. Monkey wanted to vent again, but Fat Dragon suddenly updated his message. Seems to be still there. Huh. Fat Dragon rarely spoke with uncertain words and tone, so Monkey didn't dare to easily interpret it. He cautiously confirmed, "Who is still there?" Chapter 751. What an inexplicable fellow. 3,000 kilometers away at Beishan Lake in Ban City, Luonan rapped on the table, issuing a ridiculing evaluation. Inlu, who was combing through the information, raised her head. Which one? It's that black mist. It's a perfectly fine soul body, but it's turned into billowing smoke. Sir, the soul body of our order of black mist is actually. That's the inevitable result of the interference between soul strength and the body. But this fellow is purely using a smokescreen. He's deliberately mystifying. He's got nothing better to do. Luonan slapped the table. He wouldn't tell Inlu that he was vexed because he needed to expend extra brain power to imitate this meaningless appearance. It was also because of this emotion that he could not stand the Black Fog's methods in other aspects. So he had to refute it. Luonan hastily drew a simple diagram in the work area. He grabbed the key link and fiercely criticized it. In essence, the soul-body state of the black mist was a disturbance wave that continuously radiated outwards, causing the order of the surrounding mental and material structures to go out of harmony. Therefore, it was chaotic and disorderly. There were no rules to speak of. The more it was like this, the more the core of the soul body needed to maintain a balance. The black mist adopted a method of chaos on the outside, but tranquility on the inside. There were two layers, the surface layer and the inside layer. The surface layer could toss about freely, while the inside layer was calm and tranquil. The advantage of this was that it was relatively stable. It wouldn't turn into a lunatic from the backlash of the chaotic disturbance waves. but the chaotic and disharmonious fluctuations flowed on the surface. The intensity of the interference between the mental and material planes couldn't rise. The information says that the black mist is proficient in curses. It's not good at attacking fortifications. This is the problem it was born with. This fellow really should study the knowledge of configuration in depth. He also needs to improve his courage and insight. What's the point of compromise and balance? Put more effort into the domain of rheological configuration. It seems chaotic but it's stable. It seems moving but it's static. Realize a kind of dynamic balance like a storm vortex. Won't its power increase instantly? This way, it's easier to form a resonance with the storm of the abyss region. You're using the wrong frame of reference again. Inlu didn't dare to say the words of ridicule in her mind. She didn't quite understand why Luonen wouldn't let go of the black mist, but she didn't have the obligation to plead leniency for this complete stranger. Luonen's criticism didn't affect him from doing proper business. Right now he was comparing the structure of the black mist soul body. He imitated the disharmonious disturbance wave state vividly. As for whether the inner layer would choose static or dynamic, there was no need to think too much. He would definitely strive for perfection. In any case, the people outside all felt the same. Well, without the corresponding dye, the color of the black fog is a little lighter. I hope it won't be seen through soon. Soon, the black fog spirit body reappeared on the wasteland, and the simulation was 70% to 80% similar. Of course, this imitation was an interference creation of the soul cloak, a tool that could be remotely controlled. It was still fundamentally different from an out-of-body spirit. The work was a little rough, but the timing wasn't bad. Just as the imitation was completed, the raven that acted as a surveillance carrier flapped its wings and flew past. Luonen originally didn't want to be in such a rush. He had already sent Inlu to purchase raw materials. He was prepared to make Ruewen go through the trouble of setting up a transmission array in this wasteland, and teleporting her fleshly body once more. This way, he could lock onto the coordinates of his grandfather's laboratory and conduct solid research and exploration. However, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The centaur actually married two people. After selling the official coordinates to the Toyama auction house, he squeezed out the remaining value from it and fooled a group of people to come over. Luonen certainly couldn't just sit and watch. It was a coincidence that he chose to enter as the black fog. He also had some helplessness. Coincidentally, this black fog was more suitable for him to temporarily impersonate. He didn't need to go through the link of the transmission array. He was helpless because of Dean Wantawan's sudden appearance. Luonen still didn't understand why Wantawan would meddle in this matter. However, he was fully aware that this staunch materialist's sensitivity towards the changes in the material world was simply outrageous. The condensation ring as the foundation of the soul cloak had an effect on the water molecules in the surrounding environment. Others couldn't sense it, but it had already attracted Dean Wan's attention, just like Luo Yuan did a few days ago. Luonen still wanted to cover up a bit before clarifying Dean Wan's position. The necessary and unnecessary disguise was completed, but Luonen was a bit vexed for a time. What should he do next? The standard answer was to find the entrance to his grandfather's laboratory, to explore and protect it. However, the current situation was that Luonen had started searching long before he could analyze and impersonate the black fog. Luonen had already done several rounds of investigations while the centaur was spouting nonsense. Presumably, none of the participants were like him. Their perception could easily cover a radius of 300 kilometers. However, the preliminary investigations didn't yield any results. Luonen was worried that the centaur was talking irresponsibly. The radius of 300 kilometers was just an imaginary number. He expanded it by another 200 kilometers. Within 1,000,000 square kilometers from the stratosphere to nearly 100 meters underground, Luonen had practically searched the entire area. However, he still didn't find any traces of a laboratory door. Actually, this was the source of Luonen's vexed mood. The centaur's speech and explanation were nearing the end. Right now, he was using Cui Qinghe's question to make a conclusion about Luo Yuandao's wilderness laboratory. I believe that this laboratory is very likely to be a half-plane. I don't need a noun to explain something like this. It's more or less similar to the deep blue world, or the Pacific Ocean right now. Of course, the scale can't be compared at all. You can view it as a cave, but there's no mountain base. There's only some sort of space-time depression or remnant. The centaur created his own noun without any burden. He cackled. I can't say more about the specifics. When we get there, we'll see if we understand. If we don't understand, then we don't understand. I just want to emphasize once more. Even if we get lucky and find the entrance to the laboratory, we lack the anchoring equipment. The door is unstable, and the space is unstable. We can be ejected at any time. We can also disappear or die. I won't be responsible for the consequences that occur. What are you blindly blabbering about? If we keep messing around, that fellow Black Mist will really run away. Horse Monkey was really impatient. He chattered endlessly on the internal communications network to vent his frustration. Since he didn't run away before, he definitely won't leave now. On the internal communications network, Jingxin once again cooled down the agitated horse monkey. Right now, the crux of the matter lies in the fact that the laboratory door, which should have been easy to enter, has been buried in the hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of wasteland. We need to seize the time to dig out that door and stuff all these people in. That's the right thing to do. These people? You said it yourself. Each and every one of them is here to inspect the goods. Can we really get rid of them? Even if it's the previous plan, there's no need to get rid of all of them. Besides, that fellow Black Mist, you said that he's a perfect experimental subject. It's rare to have such a good target. If he's ruined by you, why don't you report this to the Pope and the true deity? Horse Monkey fell silent. But at this moment, Horned Demon, who was supposed to be giving a generous speech, seized an opportunity to interrupt the discussion. I've heard of that fellow Black Mist. He's a super coward. He wasn't lying when he said that he was leaving. Now that he has run 100 kilometers away, he has stopped. Perhaps he has discovered something new? Horse Monkey and Jingxin's eyes lit up. Horned Demon split his attention as he discussed in secret while wrapping up his speech. He clapped his hands and said, "Time is precious. It's time to test everyone's luck. I'll also reveal some information to everyone. It can be considered an advertisement. The Toyama Auction House's spring auction is on the 13th of next month. It's said that it will be held in some high seas. Therefore, in theory, the maximum time limit for our search and research is about half a month. Yes, it's hard to say if Toyama will intervene midway to preserve its value. It's fine as long as everyone has a plan." During this time, Jingxin asked Fat Dragon about the situation of the Black Mist, to which the latter simply replied, "I don't know." No matter what, it's a clue. Don't make it too obvious. Horse Monkey, charge ahead. I'll run a little further and flank him. Jingxin was still giving commands on the communication network, but when Horse Monkey saw that Horned Demon had finally wrapped things up, he eagerly ran in the direction where the Black Mist had left. Slightly later than Horse Monkey, Gardner, Cui Qinghe, and the others also agreed with Horned Demon's statement. They boarded their respective vehicles and prepared to carry out the search. Of course, Horned Demon's proposal to delay the final payment was also a very important factor. Gardner deliberately chose to pass by Horned Demon, parked the huge SUV in front of Horned Demon, and asked condescendingly, "What I'm more interested in is the extra benefit of a small situation that you mentioned. What is it?" Horned Demon replied instantly, "A key." "A key to open the door?" The specific form is, "A woman. A woman who has the ability to lock onto and open this door." Horned Demon's words nearly scared Jingxin, Horse Monkey, and the others, who were more than 10 kilometers away. They all sent messages on the communication network. "Are you crazy? Don't speak without thinking. Wu Jun is a very precious and exclusive resource. With her in hand, we can figure out many secrets. However, she only has half a month left on her shelf life. After the Toyama Auction House's spring auction, the secrets inside will be dug out in front of the world's top factions sooner or later. What's the use of grasping it? Is there enough time? Or is the parish preparing to bid? Or do you really think that the goddess of luck is my lover, and that you can get her easily. Horn Demon's words choked Jingxin and Horse Monkey. With Fat Dragon not expressing his stance, no one could stop him. On the SUV, Gardner's interest was piqued. Do you have more detailed information? Of course. Hua Dian, who had been wandering around, turned back at some point in time and joined the conversation. I also wish to obtain a piece of information to satisfy my curiosity. Me too. Cui Qinghe's motorcycle also drove over. Horn Demon chuckled. No problem, no problem. Everyone who sees it has a share. The information transfer was quickly completed. Gardner was satisfied. He stepped on the accelerator, and the SUV stirred up a cloud of dust as it brushed past Horn Demon. He laughed and gave a thumbs up. Happy sharing. Horn Demon stood like a nail in the flying dust, staring at the SUV in the distance. The smile on his lips did not diminish, but it became more and more distorted. Chapter 752. Scourge. Horn Demon was a natural scourge. Luonan finally determined the nature of Horn Demon. He had been keeping an eye on Horn Demon all the way here. He believed that he had a general idea of what was going on in Horn Demon's mind. But he never expected that Horn Demon's desire for revenge would be this deep. Horn Demon was already here, but Wu Jun was still unforgiving. He was clearly the one chasing Horn Demon, but now it seemed as if Horn Demon owed him a blood debt. Wu Jun and the Xia Luo order were already in dire straits when facing the colossus that was the Amaterasu order. If the powers behind Gardner, Hua Dian, and the others joined in, it would be hard to say how Wu Jun would respond. Polio, who was in Spring City, only had Yen Fun by his side. The complex geographical environment around the Yuhole market wasn't enough to help them stay far away from danger. Speaking of which, Horn Demon was admittedly a madman, but his thoughts weren't limited to one place or one region. Instead, he could casually jump out of a rut and think about problems from the big picture. Perhaps the thoughts of a madman were more divergent, or perhaps he wished for the world to be in chaos. Luo Nan's 10 fingers crossed as he muttered to himself under the sunlight. Her Majesty Empress Wu's theory of being a match for 10,000 had awakened him early on, and he had the support of the mental sensor network that covered the entire world. His foundation was deep and broad, but Luo Nan had been affected by the counterexample of Snake Tongue in this series of events. Only then did he suddenly realize that he wasn't afraid of the danger of being devoured by extraordinaries. Compared to Horn Demon, Luo Nan seemed to be lacking a reckless spirit. Horn Demon wasn't the least bit afraid of adding variables to the situation. Rather than saying that he was naturally close to chaos, it would be better to say that this was the usual way of thinking of psychics. After all, psychics always had the talent and self-confidence to pluck clues from chaos. Of course, this was an implicit way of saying it. Looking at it from a different angle, it could be described as a headstrong person who couldn't see the big picture. If he couldn't come up with a logical and rigorous plan, then rolling in the mud with the enemy would be pretty good. During this process, he could use his rich combat experience to overwhelm the enemy. Yes, he had learned a move. It could be said that when 3 people walk together, there will always be a teacher. Luonan didn't fly into a rage out of humiliation from being taught by Horn Demon. On the contrary, the frustration from not being able to find the door to the laboratory had shifted quite a bit. That's right, it was a transfer. Luonan's inspiration was stimulated by the muddy pond technique of the Horn Demon. It also spurred his emotions. Accomplishing things was hard, but destroying things was far too easy. It seems that I'm very far away from the mud pool. Even the centaur dares to play like this inside. It should be fine for me to throw a stinky egg far away, right? Within Luonan's sensory network, the skinny face that came from Maho's face was suffused with an excited and cruel green light. It was practically overflowing, and Luonan felt a wave of annoyance when he saw it. The Amaterasu order, as well as the forces behind them, had the guts to lay their hands on his grandfather's laboratory. They should be prepared to face the consequences. Wait a minute, isn't it too easy for them to just have rotten eggs? Luonan suddenly stood up on the yacht Ray in Ban City's Beishan Lake. He walked in circles within the limited deck area of the sunlight area. Inlu raised her head in astonishment. She first believed that Luo Nan had encountered some unsolvable problem, but after carefully observing him a few times, she felt that something was off. Looking at that wide grin on his face, he seemed to have fallen into some kind of indescribable excitement, and was unable to extricate himself for a moment. Inlu opened her mouth, but in the end, she decided to remain silent. This was because Luo Nan had walked a few circles at lightning speed before sitting back in his original position. He wrote vigorously in the virtual work area, sketching out blueprints. Luo Nan was skilled in the application of lines, and he had a vast and broad observation perspective. Therefore, Luo Nan was able to outline the topography of the Red Earth wasteland over 3,000 kilometers away with just a few strokes. It was hard not to be scribbled, but the necessary details weren't lacking at all. The larger ditches, underground rivers, surface lakes, waterways, and so on were all marked. The range was delineated, and then came the scattered combinations of dots, lines, and surfaces. They endlessly tumbled, wandered, joined, and combined within the virtual work area. The complex structure was constructed within 2 or 3 breaths of time. It even made Inlu feel dizzy. The heavens took pity on her. Inlu only seriously considered the logical relationship between a few details. She had crammed a lot of knowledge on configuration during this time. Regardless of its practical value, it was a shortcut to get closer to Luo Nan. But what this shortcut brought her was dizziness, and even the structure of her body and soul was about to be shaken and overturned. Inlu hurriedly closed her eyes. She didn't dare to look. Clearly, the gap between her and Luo Nan was too great. She was completely unqualified to evaluate on the technical level. She didn't even have the qualifications to review it. Therefore, she could only consider and judge from a more simple and intuitive perspective. Let's first set up a reference. Inlu had a hand-drawn draft of Luo Nan's in her hands. It was the illustration he had made when he explained the connection of energy between Snake Tongue and Mr. Zhuo Weimen. Inlu once believed that it would be one of the most complex blueprints she had ever seen in her life. But now the configuration diagram, which had just begun to be drawn, looked to be several times more complex than the previous draft. Inlu really couldn't hold back the curiosity in her heart. She waited for a moment when Luo Nan stopped drawing and asked softly, "Mr. Yor? I'm building a muddy pond." "Huh? I'm building a muddy pond. Let's see how those people roll around. Let's do this for now. I'll make a simple diagram. I'll fill in the details later." Inlu subconsciously narrowed her eyes. She quickly shot a glance at the virtual work area. Forgive her for not having a high level of understanding, but the combination of configurations that made her dizzy were really hard to relate to the so-called simple diagram. A distance of 100 kilometers was actually nothing to the feet of a B-rank powerhouse. The amount of time Luo Nan spent fiddling with the configuration was enough for Horse Monkey to cross the wasteland and close the distance between the two to within 20 kilometers. Horse Monkey knew the depths of the black mist. The process of chasing and killing in his early years made him very clear that the black mist didn't excel in mental senses. The limit of the black mist's sensing radius was approximately 300 meters. Moreover, it was very unstable. However, the warning trigger line constructed on this basis could reach as far as 10 kilometers away. It was worthy of the evaluation of a coward. For the sake of not alerting the snake, Horse Monkey suppressed the simple thought process of walking straight ahead. He very cautiously stopped 15 kilometers away and contacted Fatty Dragon once more to confirm the current situation of the black mist. Fatty Dragon expressed, "He's still there." "He's always been there?" "Yes. He's been there for at least 20 minutes. He doesn't advance, he doesn't retreat. It doesn't seem like his style." Suspicion rose in Horse Monkey's heart. Now that he was mulling over it, it was getting closer and closer to the speculation of the Horned Demon. Could it be that the black mist had some dog's hit luck and had really discovered something? He disappeared. Fatty Dragon suddenly updated his information. Horse Monkey was startled. He ran away again? He disappeared. Fatty Dragon said the same words, but his mood was a bit more serious. Horse Monkey thought of many scenarios in the blink of an eye, but none of them were reliable. While he was in a daze, his extraordinary intuition, formed from years of experience in the wasteland, suddenly awakened and rang in his mind. At the same time, the air in the surrounding area vibrated. There was a clear change in the lighting of the external environment. The shadow was like a canopy covering his head. Horse Monkey raised his head in shock as he followed the vibrating sound and the angle of the light shadow. He saw a rolling black cloud appear 30 meters in the sky. It was unknown when, but it was dark and gloomy. From time to time, it would change between light and dark. It was as if it had intercepted the sunlight from the vault of heaven, causing it to transform into a dark, treacherous, and extremely ominous color. Horse Monkey! Fatty Dragon's shout came crashing over. Horse Monkey's heart sank, and he felt a little dizzy. It was only at this moment that he suddenly realized that he had been facing this ominous cloud for too long. There seemed to be an invisible attraction inside the dark cloud, hooking his soul, and he could not move away. This is bad. After waking up, Horse Monkey reacted instinctively. Faced with the seemingly harmless dark cloud, he immediately bounced backward, wanting to get out of the shadow formed by the dark cloud. It was also at this moment that a ray of light shone down from the dark cloud. The color was so frivolous that it was like a nightclub spotlight with a spot lens. However, it did not give him any time to think or react. It hit its mark. Horse Monkey was momentarily dazed. He leaped backward, which he would not make a mistake even if he had done it hundreds or thousands of times, inexplicably turned into a ridiculous and laughable diving error. The world spun around him, and then his face was forcefully smashed into the dry, hard red soil. It's a curse. Horse Monkey was glad that he could still make an accurate judgment, and his state of mind was still fine. Against the black mist, this was an acceptable price to pay. He did not even think about his ridiculous mistake. Instead, he rolled on the ground and adjusted his posture. At the same time, his soul power reached into the abyss, and he prayed to the Fusang divine tree that was already in position. The Fusang divine tree system of the Amaterasu cult was said to have 10 parallel suns. Each sun will represented a stairway to the heavens of the divine treasure. Even most of the believers, including Horse Monkey, could not reach the highest level of the ladder to receive the supreme divine treasures into their bodies. However, even the branches, leaves, and roots that had absorbed a little bit of divine power still possessed power that ordinary aptitude users could not imagine. Horse Monkey had chosen the path of exorcism, which was the best choice against the black mist. Against a spiritual expert like the Black Mist who was proficient in curses and attacks without form, there was no need to consider a fair duel. He had to use the most direct and effective method to crush it with absolute advantage. Horse Monkey had absolute confidence. Even though he was slightly weaker than the Black Mist back then, after joining the Amaterasu cult and receiving the blessing of the Fusang divine tree system, even if he had a bad start, he could instantly increase his strength level and counterattack. Moreover, he was surrounded by Fat Dragon, a powerhouse who stood at the top of the architect level. As long as he could hold the situation back, Fat Dragon could suck the dark cloud and black mist into his stomach. Chapter 753. The prayers on the spiritual level, the physical mudra, and the secret words had all been uttered. However, the coordinated movements of body, mouth and mind, which should have been one, had inexplicably turned into a clumsy performance. No matter how casual the Amaterasu cult was, the power of the fundamental system of divine treasures was not something that could be easily summoned. Maho did not even understand why his most secretive thoughts would instantly jump to a completely irrelevant and absurd concept. He had already lost his last chance to link with the system of the Fusang divine tree. The follow-up attack of the black fog arrived. Countless cursed rays rained down on him like a storm, crashing into his body and his mind, drowning him in an instant. Initially, Maho still wanted to struggle, but under the effect of the curse, his sense of coordination and balance had been completely destroyed. Any slight exertion of force would result in a conflict with the movements of the upper and lower parts of the body, and it would lead to unpredictable consequences. His struggle had become a fatal catalyst. In a breath's time, he had completely fallen into a disorderly nightmare from the inside out, from his soul to his body. Every muscle was twitching and trembling, and every nerve had turned into a dancing snake. There was no logic to speak of. Even though he was stuck to the dry and hard ground, he could still enter a state of extreme excitement. He subconsciously wriggled up and down on the ground, then shivered and lay on the ground, like an old dog that had its final radiance. Save me. Maho could no longer care about anything else. He tried to call for help, but all that came out of his throat were meaningless grunts. He wanted to project his thoughts to the internal communication network, but his mind was also messed up by the swarm of distracting thoughts. If this continued, Maho suspected that the structure of his body and soul would fall apart at any time. Before that happened, his will was already on the verge of collapse. Suddenly a bang sound exploded in his ears. The horse monkey had no idea where he came from, but right after that, the endless rays of cursed light were suddenly cut off. It seemed like it. The horse monkey's senses had dropped to the lowest point ever since he was born. He could only vaguely feel that his chaotic, disordered, and disorderly state seemed to have been alleviated. The stench of saliva, blood, and mud on his face finally stimulated his corresponding senses. Of course, there was also the feeling of stickiness. Maho didn't even need to look in the mirror to know that his snot, tears, and blood were mixed with mud on his face. He subconsciously turned over, and he actually succeeded. Sunlight shone down, and the shadow that covered his body and soul in the middle had disappeared at some point. But then warm liquid drops and broken feathers sprinkled on his face and body like burrs. As for this logical relationship, he no longer had the energy to think about it. He panted heavily, and it was only then that he felt the torment of his internal organs. A strong feeling of nausea, and the feeling of losing control worked together. A stream of heat gushed out from his throat, eyes, and even his nostrils, like a fountain. But in essence, it was the filth stored in his stomach. It sprayed high, but in the blink of an eye, it sprayed all over his face. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you." Maho mumbled as he opened and closed his mouth, but the filth poured in again. He screamed and jumped up without caring about anything else. In the blink of an eye, he fell to the ground and vomited. How unfortunate. "Are you all right?" Jingxin's concern came late, but he didn't appear. His true body was still 30 kilometers away, and he only sent his greetings through the internal communication network. Maho was about to vomit his bile out, so he wasn't in the mood to bother with him. Jingxin also knew of Maho's situation, and guessed that he likely didn't know what had happened later. He gave a simple introduction. Fat Dragon exploded the surveillance vessel, and used his flesh and blood to cast a curse that struck the black fog. That fellow was likely injured, but he still managed to escape. Fat Dragon is searching, but there's not much hope. Phew. Phew. Maho was still panting heavily. He didn't expect Fat Dragon to avenge him, nor did he expect Jingxin to help him up. They addressed each other as brothers only because of the need for action. Hiding their relationship as members of the Amaterasu cult was also a requirement for action. They knew each other very well. They were all cold people by nature. Even when Fat Dragon had saved him previously, it was likely because he felt that he could succeed. Under such circumstances, there was no need for Maho to feel resentful. Bullshit. He wanted to lash out at anyone he saw, but there was only desolate red soil around him. In fact, he had indeed ravaged the desolate plains. Now there was a shallow pit in the ground, and his crotch was wet and uncomfortable. What a nightmarish memory. F***K. 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 Maho slammed the ground with all his might, causing dust to fly up. If he were a person who wanted to be dignified, he might have slit his own throat. Maho wasn't that bad, but the moment he thought of the scene from before, he couldn't help but see stars as his organs burned. He couldn't understand or accept it. That fellow, the Black Fog, a coward who only knew how to backstab others, had become so terrifying. It was also a curse-style attack. It was a method that completely wiped out balance and coordination from the body and soul structure and psyche. It was impossible to defend against or dodge. If Fat Dragon hadn't taken action, Maho would definitely have died. And the power that ultimately killed him would likely have originated from him. Anger, humiliation, and fear. Negative emotions surged as they constantly drained Maho's energy. He had no intention of getting up. At that moment, Jingxin urged him. Are you feeling better? If you are, get up and get to work. Go F*** King Dai. Jingxin wasn't angry. Were you beaten up by the black fog again? Alright, let's be serious. Go take a look at the spot where the black fog was previously. Look at what? Remember the horned demon's speculation? At present, Fat Dragon hasn't caught the black fog, but that fellow has been circling the vicinity without leaving. This doesn't match his cowardly personality at all. Perhaps he really discovered something. Don't be fooled by the fact that he's hiding somewhere. Once we dig out what he's trying to hide, I guarantee he'll jump higher than anyone else. Maho's face twitched. Regardless of his mood, he had indeed heard what Jingxin said. Jingxin struck while the iron was hot. It's not appropriate for me to appear. It's ideal for an enemy like you to go. Don't worry. Fat Dragon and I will protect you. None of your business. Maho spat and spat out the remaining filth in his mouth. He took off his shirt, revealing his thin torso. He wiped his face with the corner of his barely clean shirt, clenched his teeth, and walked towards the target area more than 10 kilometers away. At the end of the day, he was still a B-class expert. Moreover, he was the type of person whose mental and physical aspects were more balanced. When he lost his coordination, he was in a more miserable state. This was equivalent to losing his greatest advantage. From this perspective, the black fog did have a certain restraining effect on him. However, when he regained his senses and adjusted his recovery speed, it was still quite shocking. At the beginning, he was still dragging his muddy steps, and it was difficult and sluggish. After adapting to the 1 kilometer distance, his speed increased rapidly, and he soon recovered his agile and nimble body movement. Other than the sour smell all over his body, which he could not get rid of immediately, and the obvious stains on his crotch area, he was a good man again. Furthermore, during this process, Jingxin had also sent an olive branch. No, it was the propping mulberry tree's branch. That fellow had learned from the horse monkey's lesson, and completed the prayer a long time ago. He established a connection with the Fusang divine tree, in the abyss area, guiding its power and assimilating it. At this moment, he connected with the horse monkey and shared a portion of his perception. He could also use the power of the Fusang divine tree to help the horse monkey gradually stabilize its emotions. When they were still 2 to 3 kilometers away from the target, Jingxin suddenly said, "Something's wrong." Black fog. The horse monkey's hair nearly stood on end. No, it's just that the feeling here is very different from other places. It's as though some power has interfered with it. There are remnant traces. Horned demon is indeed a spirit medium. Yes, the black fog isn't bad either. It really made him discover a problem. Jingxin was somewhat excited. The horse monkey finally jumped out of the shadows of the black fog and thought of the most important mission they had come for today. Is this the laboratory's door? Yes, it's still too early to make a conclusion. We need to observe further, but the possibility is very high. Jingxin analyzed the black fog's behavior in passing. That fellow, the black fog, came for Luo Yuandao's laboratory, but it wasn't willing to take the risk. However, after passing by and seeing some clues, it dispelled the thought of leaving and wanted to monopolize it. This is very much in line with the thoughts of a treasure hunter, but it's not the thoughts of an appraiser. Yes, it's quite reliable. Jingxin gave his analysis a thumbs up before contacting the horned demon. Quick, come over and take a look. Let's see if it matches. In a blink of an eye, he said to the horse monkey, "Be careful. The black fog might jump out at any moment." However, Jingxin's judgment was wrong this time. The black fog didn't appear again, as though it no longer had any thoughts about this place. Or perhaps it had suffered an incurable injury from its previous battle with Fat Dragon, who had failed in his pursuit, couldn't make a judgment either. He had completely lost track of the black fog. Jingxin analyzed again. Perhaps it's afraid. Your relationship with Fat Dragon will likely be exposed. Your identity can't be hidden anymore. Thankfully, everyone knows that he doesn't like to use his brain. It's very normal for him to have someone as his secretary. However, you aren't very competent as a secretary. I'm going to kill him. This him was naturally referring to him. When the horse monkey didn't see the black fog, his terrible emotions surged again. He paced back and forth on the red ground that didn't look any different. He was extremely vexed. His footsteps became heavier and heavier. Finally, he couldn't help but stomp his feet to vent his frustration. 1 kick, 2 kicks, 3 kicks, there was a muffled sound, and the red soil under his feet suddenly collapsed. Before Horse Monkey could regain his balance, there was another long cheese sound and hot steam gushed out. Although it was not enough to hurt Horse Monkey, who was a B-class expert, it still gave him a fright. His crotch instinctively shrank back, and he jumped back. What's that? Chapter 754. Monkey certainly did not want more people to see him in such a pathetic state. However, things did not go as he wished. The search, which was purely based on luck, had just begun. Most people were still wandering aimlessly without a clear direction. At this time, a small change or accident could easily attract people's attention. At the same time, as Jing Xian had said, the minds of treasure hunters and the surveyors were completely different. As the designers behind the scenes, the Amaterasu sect's way of thinking was closer to that of the surveyors. Hence, sharing information and increasing efficiency became the best choice. From Monkey's humiliating failure to the discovery of a geothermal geyser, the entire process took about half an hour. The time taken to attract others was even shorter. In less than 20 minutes, most of the participants had gathered around the newly discovered geothermal mud area. To be precise, except for Anthony, the priest, and Vanta, the dean of the Welfare Institute, everyone else had arrived to study the latest discovery. Of course, they also had to eliminate the black fog that had been chased away by Fatty Dragon. With so many people here, Monkey, as the first discoverer, had to give a reason. At this time, hiding the truth was not an option. Only a fool would reveal everything. After discussing with Jingxin and company, Horse Monkey described the old grudge between him and the black fog in a deadpan manner. He casually summarized the pursuit and the subsequent analysis and pursuit, completing the relevant logical chain. Of course, some of the hidden meanings needed to be discovered by smart people. There was no shortage of smart people on the scene. Gardner stared at Monkey's face and did not hide his ridicule at all. It sounds like you drove the black fog away, and then found this place that he was trying to hide. But looking at you now, it looks more like a victory. Also, although I'm not good at sensing, the abyss area seemed to be very lively just now. Brother Monkey, the black fog, who else was it? Gardner then looked at Fatty Dragon, who was also staring at him expressionlessly. Their eyes met. Even though Gardner was also a burly man, compared to the huge fat dragon, he was still an order of magnitude weaker, and it was the same in terms of strength. Gardner looked unruly, but he had his own plans. He did not want to lose to Fatty Dragon, who was one of the top grade B powerhouses. He laughed and waved his hand. We all know what's going on with Fatty Dragon. 1 or 2 more of you from the Amaterasu cult won't scare me to death. Why do you have to be so secretive? Moreover, it's not a good habit to neglect work for personal reasons. Fat Dragon was always numb and stiff. Maho's face turned green, red, and green. It changed back and forth 7 or 8 times, but in the end, he still clenched his teeth and didn't say anything. At this time, the centaur stood up in a timely manner and mediated in a decent manner. As I said, this is an uncertain opportunity. It is a gamble. I don't mind if any party wants to increase the probability of harvest by increasing their investment. In fact, I welcome it. Of course, I also hope that I can open less SMUF accounts to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. But then again, compared to Fatty Dragon and you guys opening SMUF accounts, I am more dissatisfied with Mr. Black Mist who slipped away. Everyone has paid the price, and none of us want to miss the opportunity. That's why I proposed the idea of sharing. Only when we get our hands on the treasure can we talk about distribution. In fact, the word distribution was almost meaningless in Luo Yuandao's laboratory. It was indeed a huge fortune, but to dig a piece of the treasure mountain, it still required enough knowledge, insight, and luck. In this context, cooperation and sharing were more important. I have emphasized this point many times, but that narrow-minded guy, Black Mist, still sees this operation as a crude and low-level treasure hunting operation. He said that he wants to quit, but in fact, he wants to take everything for himself. So that guy has pissed me off. If he dares to show up again, I will stand on your side, Mr. Maho. The centaur, Maho, and Fatty Dragon had unified their positions, but it was not suspicious. After all, no matter what the crazy centaur decided, it was not surprising. Similarly, whoever he stood with, other than the enemy, his teammates were no exception. Gardner responded with a smile. I don't mind helping to get rid of a stingy guy, but I would like to have reliable and useful information. What I'm more interested in right now is what the Black Fog has discovered. Can anyone give me a definite answer? At present, it seems to be a geothermal hot spring. While the few of them were reflecting their positions, Hua Dian had already circled around the mud several times. At this time, he casually analyzed. The plateau north of the Himalayas has always been an area rich in geothermal energy. It is not strange for a geothermal hot spring and mud to appear here. I have checked the topographic map, and there is an underground waterway nearby that is connected to the surface saltwater lake dozens of kilometers away. Gardner laughed again when he heard that. Oh, it seems that you're quite lucky, monkey. If you stomped your feet a little harder earlier, you might have broken through the magma chamber below. That kind of feeling. Maho glared at Gardner. He really had a taste of this guy's foul mouth. Compared to Gardner, who only wanted to take advantage of others with his mouth, Hua Dian, who was a detective, was more interested in the environment around the geothermal hot spring mud pool, and the traces left behind. There is still some distance between the underground aquifer and the surface. The heat pipes in the magma chamber don't seem to be enough to form a huge water pressure, causing it to gush out. In comparison, Mr. Maho's stomping seems even more insignificant. Therefore, I think that between the two stimulating elements of the magma chamber and the stomping of feet, there should be another stimulating force. Even now, it is still in effect. But we are close at hand, yet we can't detect it. Seeing that someone had cut to the chase, Jingxin immediately raised his hand in agreement. I have never been to the deep blue world, nor do I know how the plane affects the structure of space-time. However, this mechanism is also something I have never heard of or seen before, so I would like to ask Mr. Maho. Is it possible for the portal to Luo Yuandao's laboratory to be transferred to the surface? Just like the portal to the deep blue world, it is located 10,000 meters deep at the bottom of the sea? Maho frowned. He really couldn't be sure about this matter. The laboratory portal I saw was pulled by an exclusive instrument. Therefore, even if it moves, it is limited to a certain extent. Now that all the instruments have been removed, I don't know if the portal will directly sink into the ground. Tens of hundreds of meters deep in the ground seems to be meaningless for such a huge space-time structure. Chapter 755. The people around them looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. In an unknown and destined complex environment, it was too difficult for a group of psychics who were known for their sensitivity to be squeezed together. This might be a bewitching array. Cui Qinghe of the Order of Justice was one of the few physical experts in the group, so he was more used to such an environment. However, he also expressed a cautious attitude. We haven't discovered anything related to the laboratory's door. All our suspicions stem from the appearance of this mud. At the periphery of the search zone? Are you saying that this might be a joke by the Black Fog? Yes, a nasty joke. Jingxin and Horn Demon quickly communicated through the internal communication network, but they were unsure in the end. It was necessary to investigate, but how to investigate, and whether it was worth investing a lot of time and energy was a problem that needed to be determined. Hua Dian, on the other hand, made a suggestion. I have a Dao mark, a gadget that I made myself. It can basically be understood as a kind of paint that can mark the effects of various powers. It's especially sensitive to beyonder powers, which is the interaction between the mind and matter. I can put it down to verify it. The others understood what he meant. Luo Yuandao's laboratory, which they were searching for, could basically be considered a natural effect. If they discovered strong traces of beyonder powers, There was no need to say anything. It was a counterfeit nest, and everyone could just turn around and leave. Jingxin raised his hand and suggested, "We have to probe deeper. We can't sense it at the moment, so it might be because the place of effect is relatively hidden. For example, it might be hidden near the magma chamber's lava pipes and directly trigger an eruption. It's not impossible for the Black Fog's spirit body to do this. That's natural, but my abilities are limited. In such a complex area, I can at most make the Tao marker sink 100 meters or so. Compared to the thickness of the Earth's crust, it's just too insignificant. To be able to form a geothermal mud hot spring, the rock layer should be relatively thin. As long as we can probe the fault zone beneath the hot spring, it'll be fine. Something like stimulating the magma chamber and causing the water storage rock layer to break is not something that the Black Fog, who can only draw circles and curse, can do." Gardner, who had the worst mouth, had a rare analysis, and most people agreed with him. As he spoke, he even walked to the back of his off-road vehicle. Under the watchful eyes of the group, he took out a box of equipment from the trunk. He then opened the front and back doors of the car, as well as the cover of the car's roof. The interface of the dashboard, which was rich in functions, was revealed. "I can add another round of assistance." In the complicated terrain of the wasteland, I believe in the equipment more than my own senses. The centaur whistled. Inside the equipment box that Gardner took out were precision components that were neatly arranged. Some of them were slightly combined to form a round probe ball. Although the functions of the A9 detector produced by Lamar don't seem to be top-notch, it is the most portable professional instrument in the field of complex terrain exploration. It had a wealth of functional modules, such as optical imaging, metal detection, life detection, terrain mapping. You could always find the one that suited you. Well, the advertising time was over. There was still one problem to solve. In this kind of mud, normal propellers can't work, not to mention the underground rock formation and water flow. I need a buddy who can provide power, at least to help this little thing cross the harsh area in front. When it enters the underground river, it will be more sensitive than any living fish. Several B-level aptitude users looked left and right, and finally, their eyes all focused on Fat Dragon's face. The latter turned around and left without saying a word. Maho then endured the gazes of all parties, and his thin face barely squeezed out a smile. He's going to find a suitable tool. It shouldn't take long. In fact, only about 7 or 8 minutes later, Fat Dragon reappeared in everyone's field of vision. He was still holding a living thing that looked like a frog in his hand. Hua Dian was knowledgeable and recognized it at once. Cloth bag demon frog, a specialty of the plateau. This is rare. Fat Dragon asked Gardner for the probe ball, and Hua Dian had already stuffed his beacon into the storage area of this thing before. The probe ball was in his left hand, and the demon frog was in his right. It was obvious that the probe ball, which was about the size of a volleyball, was much bigger than the cloth bag demon frog. But Fat Dragon didn't care. He squeezed the cloth bag demon frog twice, and after 2 muffled croaks, the greenish-gray cloth bag demon frog began to expand rapidly. It even opened its mouth, and its cracked upper and lower jaws were even more exaggerated than the diameter of its expanding body. It easily stuffed the probe ball in. With a few wriggles of its tough skin and flesh, the probe ball firmly sank into the abdomen of the cloth bag demon frog and kept spinning. Genius idea. Gardner snapped his fingers and turned on the probe ball. After adjusting the parameters and eliminating the influence of the skin and flesh of the cloth bag demon frog, he confirmed that everything was correct and made an okay gesture. Fat Dragon threw away the demon frog that had really expanded into a bulging cloth bag in his hand, and threw the mutant into the still churning mud. Due to the terrible environmental conditions, the optical imaging module of the probe ball was not turned on. However, the thermal imaging and various detection wave technologies were still trustworthy, and the network connection was still stable. As the cloth bag demon frog sank, the structure of the lower layer of the geothermal mud hot spring that suddenly emerged was gradually outlined and enriched with details on the projection screen of the control panel of Gardner's SUV. Gardner acted as a temporary technician, and he was very used to the role. As he continued to adjust the relevant parameters, the outline and change trend of the soil, rock strata, and water flow were constantly smeared in the projection area. There was also more detailed data such as temperature, pH, and the composition of various elements. After eliminating the interference of the cloth-bagged demon frog's body, it appeared one after another. These pictures and data were enough for everyone to make some preliminary judgments. Gardner explained while operating, and he was basically able to reach a consensus with everyone. The soil and rock strata are relatively thin. Most of the area is like this, and it's possible that it was broken by the high pressure. The mineral composition is more complicated, and it's closer to the magma chamber below. It should be a metamorphic rock that was formed due to the influence of the magma chamber. This is the result of a long period of time. The youngest trace here is probably the radiation residue from World War III. The temperature continues to rise and the magma chamber is indeed more active. Anyway, I refuse to go down to explore with my body. Hey, Mr. Detective, is there any reaction from your paint? There is. Fortunately, it will show different thermal gradients, which is convenient for the instrument to sense. Huadian asked if he could join in the operation. After getting Gardner's permission, he adjusted some of the parameters in the thermal imaging system. In the blink of an eye, the interface that was still relatively clear was covered in overly gorgeous colors. Hey, sorry, allow me to simplify. How about this? I'll set the effect of transcendent power to red, and the other natural forces to white. This will be the most intuitive. Chapter 756. Tieste. There are many capable people in this world. That was quite dangerous. Luonan sighed. He reached out to scratch his head, and let out a sigh. Inlo had raised her head for the umpteenth time to look at Luonan. She felt quite helpless. Luonan was completely immersed right now, but he was definitely not a calm and unperturbed manipulator behind the scenes. He would sigh and comment from time to time. He couldn't even be considered a qualified spectator. At least for Inlo, a pitiful person who couldn't even be a spectator. It was far too cruel. Inlo felt like a cat was scratching her heart. What in the world happened in the wasteland 3,000 kilometers away? What kind of reaction would happen when 10 B-rank powerhouses converge under the arrangement of an inconceivable person like Luonan? Such a scene did not happen every year, even in the inner world. Luonan was able to observe the process of transformation, let alone from a godlike perspective. Right? Inla really didn't know how Luonan was able to observe the scene 3,000 kilometers away. She was unable to understand what kind of perspective it was. The more it was like this, the more her curiosity rapidly expanded. Soon, it crushed the sense of responsibility and professionalism that a secretary should have. In the end, she couldn't help but open her mouth and whisper, "Mister? Mister? Yes. Mister, can you tell me the current situation over there? My intelligence analysis will be useful." It was thanks to Li's long experience in the business world that she didn't blush and expose herself for such a terrible reason. However, she still successfully attracted Luonan's attention. He turned to look at her and blinked. Soon, he came to a realization. "You want to know the situation over there? You want to see?" Inlo hurriedly nodded. It was bad to be reserved at times like this. Appropriate intimacy was what set her apart from a workaholic like He Yuan. Inlu admired herself for being able to find such a powerful reason for herself in such a short amount of time. Reality proved that this move was really effective. Right now, the group of people in the wasteland were still tossing and turning around things like instruments and road signs. The pace was relatively calm, and Luonan had the leisure time to chat with Inlu. In truth, Inli's request was a bit excessive, but Luonan didn't mind. Ever since he entered the inner world circle, he was mostly fawned upon by his friends in the Xia City branch due to his young age. He created trouble, and the others helped him deal with the trouble. Even if someone made some requests, they would think it over and over again to ensure that it was within a reasonable range. Someone like Inlu, who clearly knew that she was crossing the line, but still acted like a spoiled child and begged. Well, this could be counted as acting like a spoiled child. At the very least, this kind of method was rare. So Luonan didn't feel offended. On the contrary, he felt that this was rather novel and interesting. He didn't want to refuse. At the same time, he was used to considering problems from the perspective of others. After pondering for a while, he said, "It's fine if you want to see it." "Really?" Inli's eyes were immediately filled with joy. Even she couldn't tell how much of it was real, and how much of it was embellished. Luonan didn't care about these little details. He just followed his established train of thought and continued speaking. "There's a problem. You need to be mentally prepared. I'm afraid you're not used to it. Yes, you're temporarily unable to adapt to the impact of the information flow on my sensory network. It's definitely impossible to directly sense it. Do you understand what I mean?" Inlu was startled and frowned. "I can roughly understand." The amount of information collected by a spiritual network that was several thousand kilometers away was undoubtedly enormous. Needless to say, Luonan's perception ability was close to that of a god. The pressure was certainly not something that an average person could endure. So, if you really want to see it immediately, I can only help you transfer it. It won't be a direct, comprehensive clairvoyance. Instead, I'll help you filter it. I'll let you see what you see. Wasn't this very normal? Inlu immediately responded. "This isn't a problem." No. You don't understand what I mean. If you want to accept my transfer, then you need to accept the stimulation I give you on the mental plane. It goes deep into the various planes of the senses. It isn't real to you and it's easy to confuse you. At the same time, Inlu already understood halfway through Luonan's words. She understood it very thoroughly. The only thing she didn't understand was whether this underage gentleman before her was displaying his true colors as a straight man, or if he was trying to open up a new domain of social relations. Since this was the case, Inla stopped short and replied, "I've studied Mr.'s theory. I can understand." Luonan's prison theory had an extremely famous invasion thesis. It referred to the fact that there was no public space on the mental plane. There was only the difference between being active and being passive. Active contact and invasion had similar meanings. This thesis exposed the direct and crude nature of the mental domain. It left a deep impression on people. Even if one wasn't on the mental side, one could still say one thing, two, three, for let alone a professional like Inle. "I don't mind. I can't mind." Whether it was 4 months ago when the madam asked for your help or the long period of time that followed, I had to adapt and accept these things. These words flashed through Inli's mind, but she didn't say them out loud. Being overly straightforward and revealing wouldn't help the two deepen their relationship. Instead, it would cause the subtle and harmonious atmosphere to turn into the most awkward of situations. This was the subtlety of humans. Even if the other knew the thoughts in each other's hearts, even if there were more straightforward actions, there would always be a buffer space as long as the other didn't say it out loud. There were all sorts of emotions and delusions that could be wantonly operated within this space, developing countless possibilities. This buffer space was the area that Inlo was working hard to manage in the present and future. She would only expand this space, not the other way around. In comparison, Luonan was the one who truly revealed his true colors as a straight man. On this level, he was still an immature little boy. He lacked the ability to control complex and subtle relationships. He always wanted to express something, to expose something, to let everything operate under the control of reason. As a god, he had the qualifications to pursue this kind of model, but as a man he was far from being mature. Inli's state of mind was a bit excited when her thoughts touched upon this level, but she controlled these subtle changes very well. She didn't deliberately express her affection. Instead, she used the most business-like attitude to look at Luonan attentively. "What do I need to do in order to receive your information, mister?" "Well, you basically don't need to do anything. I'll gradually introduce the information and form the relevant stimulation. Let's slowly try it out and see what level is most appropriate." That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.